Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Hellbent in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 26, Not Waiting for a Sign. The Uzushio renegades celebrate Sakura's 14th birthday with homemade cake and red bean dumplings. The mood is certainly less jovial than a birthday may call for, because all of their minds are still on the 8 trigrams, on the ticking clock slowly counting down the time they have to find a solution for it. Despite the tension, however, all 7 inhabitants of the cave try to make Sakura's birthday a good one. There are small garlands of white coastal flowers braided together and draped around the den and kitchen, sugary desserts to eat, and a messily wrapped pile of presents for the pinkette to unwrap. Kakashi somehow manages to procure for his eldest student a beautiful dark blue haori with loose billowing sleeves. It's lined with spider silk armor and enough hidden pockets to store a veritable arsenal of scrolls, brushes, ink, and kunao. When Naruto asks where he got the garment, Kakashi simply wiggles his brows and grins mysteriously. Yujito gifts Sakura a lavender hand cream from Jason. Sakura asks her if it's a callback to the lavender bath salts that Naruto and her gave Yujito nearly 4 months ago when the Kumo Kunoichi first arrived in Uzushio. The smile that Yujito gives the pinkette in response is all soft edges and fondness, even with her unnaturally sharp teeth. Naruto and Gaara work together for their gift. Sasuke knows they've been sneaking off for weeks now doing something, but even he is surprised when the 2 youngest Jinchuriki present the set of hand-carved fuinjutsu brushes to Sakura. The set of tools have been lovingly carved from the hard, white wood of the trees that cover Ozu's shores and then sand-polished till they shine. They are elegant but functional, and the tiny, messy, clearly hand-done Sakura blossoms carved at the base of each brush marks very clearly who they belong to. Sakura cries when she opens them and then cries harder when Naruto shows her the small cuts on his hands that he got while carving them, and Gaara teases her softly about being glad he is that he's no longer the only 14-year-old among them. Sasuke waits and gives his gift to her when Kakashi is distracted by Mika. The 2 books he passes her are small and don't look like much. It had still taken his summons die nearly a month to find both of them though, and when Sakura reads the titles her eyes widen almost comically. For your project, Sasuke tells her quietly enough that the others won't hear. She's not told them yet, after all. Sasuke doesn't agree with the decision to keep the others in the dark, but he can't throw stones in this particular glass house. She wants to get stronger, and even though the risk for the path she's chosen is great, Sasuke believes fully that it's still her choice to make. Hopefully, Chakra Coil Anchors, Integrated Fuinjutsu and Medical Jutsu Volume 3, and Traditional Fuinjutsu Tattooing, can make the path a little less treacherous, or at least make it so that she's walking it less blindly. Sakura stares down at the books for several long moments, overwhelmed to the point of silence, a rarity for the girl who is never short on what to say or do. Finally, she wraps an arm around his shoulder and pulls him into a hug, books still held tight against her chest. Thank you for believing in me. Sasuke nods, a little awkward but mostly just happy that she's happy. I trust that you can do this, he tells her, and means it. Sakura will figure this out. She is meticulous and thorough and the most brilliant person Sasuke knows. He trusts that she can accomplish anything she sets her mind to, and he equally trusts that she is smart enough to do so without taking unnecessary risks. Happy birthday, Sakura, he says quietly, and has to bury a grin as Naruto sneaks up behind her preparing to smush leftover cake into her hair. Less than 3 weeks later, Sasuke finds that he wishes he had been less trusting of his pink-haired teammates' rationality. Sakura stands in front of the unassuming wooden door and takes a long, slow breath. She glares at the door. The door does not return her ire. For what lays beyond it she really feels like it should be more ornate or more threatening. But no. The entrance to the chamber that Sakura discovered 2 months ago is the simple, white wood of every other door here in the archives, no embellishment, no description, no warning. She takes another breath. This is a really stupid plan. Sakura happens to be very smart, so she knows that it's very stupid and that it's reckless and desperate, but the image of Naruto pale and vacant and dying flashes across her mind's eye again. They are running out of time, and her team, depending on her, trusting her, can't afford to wait any longer. So yes, this is reckless, stupid, desperate, but it's also necessary. Certainty rediscovered, Sakura reaches and opens the door. The room she steps into beyond is large and almost as bare as the door that guards it. Proximity seals standard to the archives flare as she steps further in and golden light floods the space. The light makes the single, defining feature of the room impossible to ignore. The seal painted across the entirety of the floor is easily the most complex one Sakura has ever seen. To her trained eyes it's beautiful. The seal is a dance of sweeping lines and curves and symbols. Some of the details are so small she would barely be able to make them out without a viewing glass, while others are nearly a foot across. The seal manages to almost be more art than function, though Sakura is absolutely certain that it functions just fine. Over her time here in Uzushio she's spent more than 1,000 hours studying seals, and while she had started as a beginner she now regularly dissects high-level seals. Master-level seals. The 8 trigrams alone is a miracle of fuinjutsu, precise and complex and degraded to the point that it's like a paper airplane that is somehow still maintaining its flight in the midst of a cyclone. The memoriam seal that she is adapting to use against Orochimaru is incredible too, steady, deep and absolute, like something that months ago she would never have thought that lines of ink could be. Not to mention her personal project, but this seal, buried deep in the Uzushio archives, hidden away in an unmarked room, is impossible. Sakura has snuck away from the others several times now and just sat and looked at the lines that whirl across the stone floor in front of her. She has stared at them so many times, studied them so carefully, that she's begun to see them with her eyes closed. She's snuck here with stacks of books and her own detailed notes, but still she is barely beginning to scratch the surface of the seal's detail. But she has figured out what it's for. If the seal is a novel, she's learned the language it's written in well enough to be able to read the chapter headers, the title, the synopsis. She has more than enough information to know that what she's about to do is so stupid. Kakashi-sensei is going to kill her when he finds out about this, but she hopes that he's also going to understand why it was worth it. If she can make it back out, that is. Because the seal in front of her is so beautiful, but it is beautiful just like the whirlpools that Sakura has heard about from the fishermen who come and go from Jason. The swirling vortexes of water are a well-known hazard of the turbulent ocean that surround Oizu. According to the stories that Sakura has listened to, they will swallow a person whole and never let them out. This seal is the same. The young fuinjutsu specialist crouches at its outer reaches, eyes tracing across the nearly 30 feet of minuscule inscriptions once again. The seal is old. It's still pristine, no degradation visible, but she can tell just by looking that it has been here as long as the archives themselves. She thinks that it's even possible that this seal was placed here before anything else was. To say the seal is complex would be like saying the sun was bright or that the ocean was wet. There are so many different aspects of it that Sakura is certain that she could spend years happily unraveling and documenting all that went into it. All those aspects are somehow perfectly harmonious, balanced, and intertwined with one another. It's like an orchestra of 1,000 instruments. On its right-hand side, Sakura rereads the segment she had decrypted last week, dedicated to binding and trapping chakras that interacted with this seal. In the secondary ring there is an entire section related to permanence, to literally weaving the veins of the seal in with the natural energy flowing through the land it rests over. In its northern hemisphere is something akin to the structure of the curse mark, something designed to reach beyond the borders of the seal, to inscribe and tether. Curling through the body of the inscription is something that Sakura would call the bastard child of a memoriam seal in a sealing contract, something that she would have never thought was even possible until seeing it. And most striking of the whole ineffable construction is the seal's heart, its center, the core melody that binds the entire song together. It's simple, really. The matrix is nearly identical to that of your average storage seal, something Sakura learned how to replicate in the first couple months of her studies, that she knew how to identify even while still in the academy. This isn't for storing kunao or traveling packs though. It's a knowledge sink, a library that's been condensed into 2 feet of ink that curls and twists like roots, all bound up in the middle of more than 20 feet of the most perfect fuinjutsu work that Sakura has ever seen. Sakura understands all of this. She reads it in the curling wordless language of fuinjutsu, the language of give and take and power and flow and silence that she has taught herself over the past 5 months. In the same language, in a voice that is prideful, that is daring her to try, the seal before Sakura says what its name is. The Crucible Seal. Even if she couldn't read seals to know that's what this incredible construct of fuinjutsu was christened, the single other point of information in the room beside the seal would give the game away. The carved words on the wall across from the door are stark and clear. The inscription reads, "For those who would call themselves Master." Crucible. Master. A seal that holds chakra and has every ability to drag her mind and power into its depths and never relinquish them. A seal that is completely dormant until someone funnels their chakra into it with the express purpose of waking it, of seeing if they can pass whatever test it apparently offers. Sakura closes her eyes and weighs her options one more time. It's really all right there on the tin. This may be a reckless move, but she is not a reckless person. She is a strategist and a protector and, well, she supposes that if she decides to go through with this, she'll know soon enough if she's good enough to call herself a fuinjudist. The Crucible Seal has the answer to solving the problem of the 8 trigrams. She's more certain of it than of anything in her life. Somewhere beyond all the barriers of ink and the cursive demands, hidden away in its heart, Sakura will find how to save her best friend. If, like she said before, she can make it back out. She breathes deep and thinks of what her team would say. Naruto would yell at her and then probably cry. Sasuke would try to kick her ass and then yell at her. Yujito would carry her away by like scruff like a mother cat would a naughty kitten and then lock her in a room until she promised to behave and Gaara would help her. Yotakata would cross his arms and frown in that way that managed to convey disappointment more loudly than any shouting ever could. Sakura values all their opinions, but right now, trying to decide to take this risk or not, they are not the voices she imagines. She pulls the memories to the surface of her mind as she often does in moments when she isn't sure what to do, when she's doubting herself. It's Kakashi-sensei's voice in every memory, his piercing eyes, his measured faith in her. She remembers his gaze meeting hers when they were still unsure if Yujito and Gaara were there to kill them or not, remembers his belief in her promise to fix the 8 trigrams, remembers him asking her to be the one at his side when he had to bury the remains from the Uzushio Academy ruins, remembers him supporting her when she swore to get stronger so long ago in front of the Dawn-Kissed Hatake compound. She remembers 100 moments of him pushing her, challenging her, daring her, to be better, to be greater. The memory that makes the decision for her now is still crystal clear even though it happened more than half a year ago now. She recalls the smell of a coming storm and the dust of a house long empty, the sound of Naruto and Sasuke's panicked breaths and her own thundering pulse, the sight of the chakra barrier flickering treacherously under her weakness. Sharper than all of that though, than all the pain and mistrust and fear of that night, is the memory of Kakashi, turning to her, wild and absolute, and telling her that limits were nothing, that her team needed her to be strong and so he knew she would be. Telling her that he trusted her to be enough. Sakura is brilliant but she isn't a genius like Shikamaru. She is strong but she isn't a Jinchuriki like Naruto and doesn't come from a long clan line of warriors like Sasuke. She has no Kekujinkai and no special weapons or techniques that have been passed down to her. What she has to offer instead has always been a stubborn refusal to back down no matter the odds, no matter how far behind she is from the starting line. Sakura looks again at the Crucible Seal. She thinks of the months of research she's done for the 8 trigrams. She knows enough now to be positive that the gap in her knowledge is still too great for her to intuit a solution and that Uzushio doesn't have any more tricks to pull out of its long scorched and broken streets to aid her. Without a miracle, she cannot solve the 8 trigrams and she cannot save Naruto and Kurama. But the Crucible Seal is a miracle. She closes her eyes, hears Kakashi's voice from that night so long ago, "Sakura, there isn't another option. You have to." She's scared, but from the very beginning, she's known that doing the impossible was what she is meant for. That's not because she's a genius but because she will not be stopped by words like impossible. Or even words like stupid, reckless or oh god. Sasuke and Naruto really were going to kick her ass for this. No time for that now. She has insurmountable odds to overcome after all. Sakura rises from the crouch she's been settled in and walks to the open door. It's time to alert the masses to what's about to happen. Placing her hands together in the ram sign, the Pinkette concentrates for a moment, centers herself, and then in the energy equivalent of the loudest shout she can muster she flares her chakra. It's something Kakashi taught them on the road months ago as a signal for if one of them ever got into trouble and needed to call for help. Sakura isn't in trouble yet and she isn't going to let the rest of Team 7 help her when she starts being in trouble either, but she does want them to know she's here. Not much time to waste now. Moving fast, she turns and strides back to the edge of the Crucible Seal. Kneeling once again at its outermost border, she begins flashing through hand signs rapidly. This barrier jutsu is one she has known for more than a year now. It had been a bonus homework from none other than Irika-sensei back when she was still in the academy and pretending to be in love with Suzuki, all the while aching to be something more. It is a strong jutsu, able to be maintained with a relatively minor if a perfectly steady flow of chakra. It had saved them that first night after the Forest of Death in Orochimaru. Sakura thinks that maybe it's going to save them again now. She doesn't have long left. Maintaining her hold on the barrier, she pulls her new Fuinjutsu brushes out of the pouch on her hip. Quickly, neatly, perfectly, she begins to paint the seal she needs against the inside of the barrier itself. It's a seal once used to strengthen and guard the levees built along Uzashio's shores during typhoon season. Sakura has adjusted it to stabilize not stone but energy. It only takes her 2 minutes to complete the underpinning seal, and by the time she's done she's able to sit back from the barrier that now surrounds her and the crucible seal and allow her concentration on it to relax. The barrier stays up. It's still drawing chakra from her, but she no longer has to focus on maintaining that flow of chakra perfectly. Next, she pulls out a small handful of chakra crystals. Similar if significantly smaller than the one they once used to remove the curse mark, the tiny vessels of energy hold among them about 4 hours of chakra for the barrier. Sakura sets them on the ground and with precise strokes places an energetic vessel around them and then draws a conduit to the barrier and the seal, keeping it steady. She sits back again, furrowing her brow as she looks at her overlay. If she's right, and she thinks she is though she's never actually tried this combination before, the pairing of the chakra crystals, barrier, and underpinning seal should mean that no one will be able to reach her to pull her away from the seal for at least the first 30 minutes it takes her to fully activate and access the seal's challenge. She's still not sure what exactly the crucible has to offer her, but she knows that it will likely take a little bit for her to actually reach it. She's not foolish enough to even think for a moment that the barrier will last more than an hour. Knowing her sensei and her team, when they find out what she's doing here, yeah, she best hurry. Sakura moves to the edge of the crucible again and examines its array carefully. She finds the spirit and chakra at it quickly. Compared to the convoluted nature of the rest of the seal, it's a simple and clear pathway. Whoever crafted this seal may as well have written, "Please place hands here," Sakura thinks a bit sardonically. She settles into the lotus position and with hands that only shake a little she reaches back and pulls her hair into a tight ponytail. Sakura pops her neck and takes a bracing, deep breath. It's time. She doesn't hear the footsteps of his arrival, but Kakashi's voice still doesn't surprise her when it sounds through the bare room from the doorway behind her, tense and worried. "Sakura? What are you?" Her teacher trails off. She looks back over her shoulder, watching the whip-fast way his bichromatic eyes fly over the sight before him. It's all rather obvious, she knows, rather incriminating. Her, the barrier, the seal. "Sakura," he says again, and this time he sounds afraid, sounds angry. "Whatever you are doing, you need to stop and tell me what's going on." "I'm dash." Sakura wants for one damning moment to throw herself out of the barrier and into his arms. But she has to do this. "It'll be okay, sensei," she interrupts him with the most confident smile she can muster. "I'll see you on the other side." And then she turns away from him and yanks chakra to the surface of her skin. Without another moment of hesitation, she slams her palms down onto the crucible seal and pours energy into it. The seal explodes into radiance under her touch as a mass of chakra that had been sleeping for nearly 2 decades awakens with all the subtlety of 100,000 paper bombs. A burning, scorching, golden light fills every corner of the room instantly, chasing away the shadows and making the words carved on the wall stark. Sakura has just enough time to hear Kakashi scream her name and for a single thought to materialize in her mind. "I may have miscalculated on how long it would take me to lose consciousness," she thinks with surprise. And then her mind falls forward into darkness. Chapter 27, Give Me My Voice. Sakura opens her eyes and blinks against the strange, sourceless light that meets her gaze. She's standing alone in an empty room, unfamiliar room. Actually, she does recognize the space. This is the exact same room that she had literally just been in, only this one is completely bare. There is no crucible seal on the floor, no lit sconces on the walls, no carved text on the wall. It's just her in the bare space. Actually, it's not just her. Her mind processes the fact that she's not alone before her eyes actually see anyone else, and not because she just misses the other presences or because they are hiding, but the figures who suddenly surround her on all sides are simply not recognized by her consciousness until now. Genjutsu? She finds herself wondering. It certainly feels like it, like her senses are not her own. She turns her head slowly side to side, counting. 11 strangely faceless shades stand around her. They are human, she thinks, but her gaze seems to slip from their features like oil off the ocean's surface. They are simply shadows. And then suddenly they are not. A voice breaks the thundering tension of her heart. It's an old crackling voice, dry but strong. Did you come here on accident, little girl? Sakura turns to the speaker. He's standing on her left and she can see him now. He's old, so old, with hair as white as sea foam and eyes pale and sightless. His skin is tan and freckled from sun exposure and he wears a dark blue robe patterned with intricate embroidery of churning waves and leaping orca. He doesn't say anything more, but as Sakura meets those piercing eyes she finds that she knows him. Iman Oki, born in the Warring States period, first seal master of Uzushiagakuer. Died of heart failure at 78. Married to Megumi Oki. Favorite food dried seaweed crisps. Birthday. Sakura shakes her head against the deluge of information. What is going on? Well. Iman demands. No, Why is she so nervous? I am here on purpose. I am seeking information. Information? There are less foolish ways to find information. It's a new voice and Sakura turns again, this time to her right, and behind her another shade has gained a face. This man is younger. He has dark hair and an intricate beard. He's wearing traditional battle armor, red as blood, and has his arms crossed sternly over his chest. Yasumichi-son, Sakura's whirling mind supplies, born immediately after Uzushio was established. 4th Seal Master of Uzushiagakuer. Was killed in the Second Shinobi War by Kumo forces. Prefers cold weather over hot. Invented the split inscription technique. Sakura groans, presses a hand against her eye and tries to fight past the nausea that's beginning to swim in her gut. Would you all settle down and let the child get adjusted? If she says she's here on purpose, then we need to treat her with the same respect as any other who comes before us. Sakura doesn't even have to physically look this time to be assaulted with the image of the woman speaking now. She's middle-aged and tall, with dark skin and intricate white tattoos curling across the surface of her cheeks down over the collarbones bared by her elegant kimono. Mahori Ige, 3rd Seal Master of Uzushiagakuer. Contributed to front-line transfer practices and revolutionized Fuinjutsu battle usage during the Second Great Shinobi War. First Kunoichi to be granted the title of Seal Master. Suddenly Sakura is inundated with identities and faces and names and lives. Fuyaki Heijiwara, 10th Seal Master, born 48 years ago during a hurricane. Jin and Rin Matsuo, 9th and 8th, identical twins, though Jin was 3 centimeters taller and made sure everyone knew that. Masabumi Fukunaga, 6th, killed in Tea Country in an ambush but still managed to take out 36 men before he went down. Rikona Oki, 7th, notorious for her detonator trap Fuinjutsu. Deiju Hisamatsu, 2nd, once voted most likely to trip over his own feet out of all the Uzushio Jonin. Kane Hirochiki, 5th, allergic to cats. Sakura finds herself on her knees, panting and vision swimming. Her brain feels like it's been rattled around inside her skull. She looks up, blinking, trying to begin making sense of the baffling, overwhelming stream of knowledge, and realizes someone is kneeling in front of her. The woman peering at her face with concern is young, no more than 17. She is by far the youngest among the 11 people in the room. No, not just people, the Seal Masters in the room. Sakura isn't a fool and she can see the unifying threads in each of their lives. As diverse and colorful and individualistic as they lived, all 11 of the shades share the stain of ink and the drag of brush calluses on fingertips and the legacy of burning, binding, dancing, world-shattering seals. You all right? The woman's voice is warm and her eyes are a silver so bright that they shine like the moon, and her hair is red, red, red. Her name hits Sakura like a fucking sledgehammer to the gut. Nami Uzumaki. 11th Seal Master of Uzushiagakuer. Youngest ever confirmed Fuinjutsu master in the history of the village. Liked ramen and spicy things. Cousin Takushina Uzumaki. Died 2 months after receiving her confirmation with a kunai through her throat during Whirlpool's fall, 19 years ago. She's Naruto's family. Sakura thinks and doesn't manage to fight back the tears that thought brings to her eyes. Just breath, Nami tells her, placing calloused hands on Sakura heaving shoulders. Let the information flow and it'll get easier, yeah no. Fuck, Sakura gasps out cause it's too much. But she listens to the young woman's advice and just lets herself know the things she knows now without fighting it. The rest of the Uzushio Seal Masters wait. After only another minute of steady breathing, Sakura feels a little less like her brain is trying to leak out of her ears and, giving Nami a slightly strained smile, she stands. Feeling better, child? That's Iman again, white eyes studying her with less hostility than before. Sakura still feels her spine straighten subconsciously under the examination, her chin tilting up in proud defiance. She dares him to find her as anything less than worthy of. Worthy of what exactly? She's in the dark as to what is going on here. She had known that the Crucible Seal would test her, but she really hadn't expected an actual, conscious jury. What is your name, girl? Demands Yasumichi. His red armor clinks subtly as he walks closer to her side, judgmental eyes dragging over her form. Sakura wishes that she hadn't worn sweatpants and a tank top for this, but even more she wishes that Yasumichi would back off before she's tempted to see if the seal's design will allow her to hit the ghosts that it holds. Sakura Harano. She manages to grit out in response. Nami tilts her head curiously this way and that, an energetic habit that Sakura has seen Naruto do more than once. I don't see a headband or village symbol on ya. And you can't be a Uzushionin because last I checked Mist and Cloud fucking destroyed everything. Her silver eyes sharpen and suddenly they don't remind Sakura of the moon anymore, but of a freshly sharpened katana. Who do you answer to, Sakura Harano? Sakura refuses to flinch under that gaze. I don't answer to a village. My team and I defected from Konohagakure nearly 7 months ago. There is an uproarious laugh from Sakura's left as Jin tilts sideways into his twin, slapping a hand against his thigh in mirth. You're a fucking missing nin. And you somehow stumbled into the archives and accidentally activated the crucible? Oh god, that's the funniest thing I've heard since I died. Shut up, G, you're being annoying again, snaps Rin, shoving his brother off him. No one would be able to blame Sakura for losing her temper. I didn't stumble anywhere. Sakura explodes at the room at large. I arrived here in the archives with an Uzumaki and have been instructing myself and seals since then, and I am very good. I fully intend to take and pass whatever test you deem necessary to saddle me with so that I can access the information sink at the heart of this seal. She's breathing heavily by the time she's done, and she knows her cheeks are the splotchy red flush that they turn when she gets overly agitated. She doesn't care though. She will not stand here passively while these shades, these memories trapped in ink, insult and doubt her. 11 pairs of eyes stare at her in shock. Wow, you mean it, says Rin, blinking large black eyes at her. You've been studying for less than a year and you intend to take our test, scoffs Yasumichi, and he sounds annoyed, but he also sounds worried. You don't know what I'm fucking capable of. Sakura snarls at him. She doesn't want his annoyance or his concern. Sakura-chan, Nami's tone is softer, more serious than it's been yet. Do you know how this works? Do you know what happens if you don't pass? The fear that's been swimming in the base of her stomach since she discovered the crucible reaches out into her veins like poison before Sakura manages to grab and wrangle it back under control. She does know. The crucible seal hadn't been hiding the threat it was. If I fail, the seal consumes my chakra entirely and uses it to continue powering itself for years to come. It kills me. And yet you still choose to risk this, to come before us with no village to defend and half a year of study to prepare you. Mahori hasn't moved once in the whole exchange so far, her hands remaining tucked away in her sweeping kimono's robes. Sakura meets her eyes, meets all of their eyes one at a time, and says again, softer, you don't know what I'm fucking capable of, and then as that sinks in she adds, and I have something far more precious than a village to defend. The 11 seal masters look at one another and then in a voice, ringing and official, Iman pronounces, very well, nothing else to do for it. Let us begin the admittance test for the confirmation or expulsion of a new seal master to our ranks. Sakura's brain squeaks to a halt. Sorry, what was that? I just wanted to access the information stored here. I'm not looking to be dash. Mahora does move now, pulling her hands from her sleeves and sweeping them wide to gesture around the room at the collected Fuinjustice specialists. Harano, look at us. Think about who you are speaking to. What do you think the information you seek is? Where do you think it comes from? Oh, thinks Sakura. Oh, holy shit. She opens her mouth to say something smart and instead says, oh my gods, I'm an idiot. You all are the information sink. It's the collection of your knowledge, your experience. You're an archive in memory form. Not an idiot, says Nami, tilting her hand side to side in a so-so motion. Fuyaki didn't figure it out until Mahora told him apparently. The middle-aged blonde who'd been silent until now flushes under the spiraling clan symbols on his face and hisses, Nami, not cool. The young Uzumaki sticks her tongue out at him and then flashes a playful, conspiratorial smile Sakura's way. It's so familiar that some of the fear drains out of her. It's replaced, however, by confusion because, but wait, I know there are other seal masters that exist outside of Uzushio and this seal. Jiraiya is a dash. A shriek like a banshee rends through Sakura's question. That fucking shit heap on legs is still alive? No one's killed him yet. Rakona explodes, and despite the fact that she barely reaches her shoulder, Sakura has to fight the sudden urge to hide behind something. Deep breath Rakona-san, deep breath, hums. Masabumi, patting Rakona's shoulder nervously and with the look of someone ready to yank his hand back at any second lest he lose a finger. Jiraiya is no seal master, Sakura. Iman speaks over Rakona's ongoing snarls of rage. His bushy eyebrows are pulled low, making the heavy wrinkles on his face even more pronounced. He was talented for certain, but there were many talented Fuinjutsu experts the world over once, and while some of them may have paraded the title master in fits of boastful pride, they were not and will never be recognized among us. Because they haven't passed whatever your test is. Sakura realizes aloud. Iman inclines his head in acknowledgement. Sakura squeezes her eyes shut and thinks, oh god, this was a crazy idea, and then she thinks, Kakashi is going to kill me, and then, I really shouldn't tell Kakashi the details at all. She takes a deep breath, opens her eyes, thinks, I'll decide whether I tell him or not when I see him after I survive this. Out loud she says, what do I need to do? Elsewhere, in a dark corridor deep in the belly of the Uzushio archives, Kakashi is pacing. The hallways this deep in the archives are claustrophobic, the ceilings low and dark, uneven stone. He stalks 10 paces, turns on his heel, and stalks 10 paces the other direction. He feels, literally, like a wolf in a very small cage. He looks again into the doorway of the room he's passed easily 300 times over the past several hours. Nothing has changed since the last time he checked 13 seconds ago. Despite this, despite Obito's Sharinon offering him the uncomforting certainty that Sakura hasn't so much as shifted since he last asked, Kakashi grits out, anything. Sasuke, kneeling next to his teammate with his fingers pressed on her pulse point and his own Sharinon activated and trained on her slow breaths, shakes his head. Nothing since her pulse spiked and her face got all flushed nearly 2 hours ago. Kakashi snarls under his breath and turns, continuing his worn circuit on the stone floor. Sakura has been unresponsive for 6 hours now. 6 hours since Kakashi appeared in the doorway of the sealing chamber, ready for the worst after her chakra flare, only to watch her activate the massive seal spread across the space with an explosion of energy. It had only taken them 30 seconds to get through the barrier she set up, and not because the barrier wasn't very robust. It was better than almost any Kaka he had ever seen, in fact, perfectly executed and then enforced with a seal that if he had been alone would have taken him hours to surpass. But Kakashi wasn't alone because Naruto had arrived only moments after he had watched the seal activate. Smelling his sensei's terror and seeing Sakura's unmoving form behind the wall of energy, Naruto had looked at the barrier and then he had simply gone through it. Kakashi still isn't sure exactly what happened. One moment his blonde student had been standing next to him, all panting breaths and wide red eyes and radiating worry, in the next. Kakashi had never seen the Six Tails form of Naruto's Jinchuriki transformation before today. He hopes he never has to see it again. The boy had torn through the wall with clawed hands of roiling, hyperdense, amber chakra as if it was made of paper. The barrier had failed and Naruto had hit the ground next to Sakura on his hands and knees, choking on bile as the 8 trigrams fluctuated with the overwhelming amount of energy and panic roiling in it. Sasuke and Yujito had come barreling into the room only moments later, still sweaty from training together. The only reason Kakashi had refrained from yanking his pink-haired student away from the malicious thing lighting the room was that before he could, Yujito had grabbed him and thrown him away from her. "Think for a second, you fucking idiot." The Two-Tails Jinchuriki had screamed at him, standing between him and his kids, backlit by the light of the seal with wide, wild eyes. "Kakashi, there is no telling what pulling her away from the seal would do. If you don't stop and think, you're going to get her killed." She'd been right, but Kakashi had still almost gone through her like Naruto had gone through the barrier jutsu to get to his kid. Infuriating, caring, stupid woman. If he didn't truly love Yujito before, count her as precious before, the fact that without her Sakura may be dead. Suffice to say, he owes her. The other Jonin had taken Naruto and left a few hours ago. The blonde Jinchuriki had been furious at being made to leave. Even pale, trembling and in cold sweats as his seal shuddered under the brunt of his negative emotions, he hadn't been willing to even consider leaving Sakura's side. It wasn't until Sasuke had grabbed his blonde teammate's face, and butting his forehead none too gently against his, said, "I'll bring her back. Trust me, you idiot," that Naruto had relented and allowed himself to be guided back to the main part of the caves. Now all Kakashi and Sasuke can do is wait. Sakura is still exactly as she was so many hours ago. She is sitting in a relaxed lotus position with her hands pressed just inside the edge of the gently glowing seal. Tiny beads of cool blue light travel along the seal's arteries in an indiscernible pattern. Occasionally the whole construct flares slightly, sparks of faint energy drifting upward towards the low ceiling. The words carved into the stone wall do not move, mocking and challenging, and neither does Kakashi's student. He paces by the doorway again. As he did once so many mornings ago, Kakashi looks at Sakura, brave, determined, so clever and so ruthless, and he thinks of Obito. Obito who he loved. Obito who died in a cave. Obito who died where Kakashi could do nothing but watch helplessly. Just as he can do nothing now. Something in him tenses, nearly snaps, and Kakashi snarls and spins, preparing to slam a fist into the nearby stone wall, furious at his powerlessness. "Hey!" The rage in Sasuke's voice stops him short. The Uchiha's hands are still steady and careful on Sakura's pulse, never risking shifting her hands from where they make contact with the surface of the seal, but his Sharingan eyes are blazing as he looks back at Kakashi. "Don't you dare!" Sasuke rebukes. "She needs you to hold it the fuck together." He stumbles, clenches his eyes shut. "I need you to hold it together. Mika isn't here, and if you start going to pieces then I'm dash." Kakashi hears the rising panic even though Sasuke's hands never falter, never tremble. "I'm the most selfish mentor ever," Kakashi thinks darkly. "I'm not the only one who is terrified of losing the people I love." Without a word he makes his way over to Sasuke and crouches by the boy. He doesn't touch him, doesn't apologize, but when Sasuke turns wide, fearful eyes toward him, Kakashi offers a tremulous, crooked smile in response. "I'll wait here with you, until she wakes up." Kakashi refuses to even consider the possibility that she won't. Sasuke nods gratefully and turns back to continue focusing on monitoring Sakura's condition. Once his student's gaze has left him, Kakashi clenches his eyes shut and tries to breathe through his memories. Sakura is not Obito. She is not lost to him. She will not be another name on the memorial stone that is his heart. Kakashi settles in next to his kids and waits. Back in the ceiling space, Sakura is trying hard to bury the feeling that she is barely treading water in a veritable ocean of peril. The test is simple, Iman tells her, all that is required is that you add something unique to the knowledge accumulated here. Sakura blinks hard. "So I have to show you something you've never seen before." The Uzushio seal master's nod. Her heart is in her throat. Does it have to be completely original? Can it draw inspiration from other seals? Kanehiro shrugs a little, questionable but not unprecedented. Masabumi passed with a particularly original adaptation of Yasumichi's concussion seal. But it is risky. Cuts in Mahori. Where is the line between inspiration and plagiarism? Between tradition and originality? Fuck, Sakura thinks. Her adaptation of the Memoriam seal is just that, An adaptation. It won't be enough. But her personal project isn't ready and she's never tested it and it's crazy, she thinks desperately. It's her only choice though. She has nothing else original to offer, nothing to add to the knowledge pool. Talk about trial by fire, she thinks. All right. I know what I'd like to offer. Very well, Eamon says, then repeat after me. I, Sakura Harano, before this council of my peers and elders, do offer a seal of my own, to expand and strengthen the art Uzushio's legacy of Fuinjutsu and to prove my capabilities as a master and crafter of the practice. Sakura does so, though she barely hears the words leave her mouth. This is it. All her cards on the table, all her skills under the magnifying glass. No notes, no guides, no second chances. This is where she finally learns if she is more than just a bookworm with a good memory. Begin, says Eamon. A pot of ink and a set of standard Fuinjutsu brushes appears on the ground in front of her. There are no scrolls to accompany it, so Sakura assumes that whatever she's supposed to show is to be placed on the floor just as the crucible seal was. She needs a different canvas for her seal, however. Sakura crouches on the floor in front of the brushes and ink and then, taking a deep breath and fighting down the foolish, juvenile urge to blush, she pulls off her tank top. None of the Fuinjutsu masters say anything, but in the strange sealing space of the crucible Sakura can still feel their confusion. Ignore them, she commands herself, and reaches for the brushes. She lays the first lines at the base of her throat, the gestures so familiar by now that she has no need for a mirror. The upper aspects of her seal are still minimal anyway, the complicated, intricate, detail won't come till her midriff and below her elbows. The Uzushio masters have drifted closer. 11 pairs of eyes watch her work keenly. A corporeal seal, murmurs Rin, no one has tried that before. No one has had the balls to, grins Nami, and she moves a step closer and crouches in front of Sakura again, her silver eyes alight with fascination as Sakura carefully, steadily paints the matrices of her creation across her ribs. Sakura is trying to ignore why no one has likely tried to demonstrate a corporeal seal in this test before. Despite her best efforts, the words of one of the earliest books she read here, a fundamentals guide that went over many of the core rules of Fuinjutsu, runs through her mind. Corporeal seals, otherwise known as seals that are inscribed upon a person's body, are rare and difficult. Because of a shinobi's natural chakra system, any long-term seal matrices placed on the skin will either disintegrate or do lasting damage to the chakra network and coils of the seal's bearer. Only seals that are passive, or stabilized externally, are corporeally applicable in the long term. Sakura's seal is neither of those things. When she had tried to externally stabilize it, the whole structure had collapsed and, well, to call it passive couldn't be further from the mark. She pushes past the doubt. She knows this will work. She's spent days poring over referential texts both about Fuinjutsu and medical jutsu. She's spent entire nights studying her own chakra pathways and meditating as she familiarized herself with every single state that the energy in her body would naturally flow into. No matter what the books say, what they believe is impossible, she knows this will work. If it doesn't though, her thoughts whisper treacherously. Sakura ignores the doubt, lifts the brush and takes a deep breath, calming the tremble that tries to work its way into her hands before continuing. Another minute passes and she begins drawing out the lines on her stomach. This is where her work needs to be the most careful. In the hundreds of times she has practiced drawing this seal out, the majority of her mistakes are made here. Here, where she is weaving several different types of seals in with her own chakra coils and pathways, stabilizing it by intertwining the network she is painting onto her skin with the one that runs under it. She moves to her arms. The drying crackle of ink on her skin is an annoyance, but the eyes on her are a distraction. She ignores them, refuses to look at the jury watching her every brush stroke. Daijo lets out a hum of surprised recognition as Sakura sweeps the brush down over the back of her hands, spirals lines out in a parody of a seal she first saw 6 months ago. Those are my key seals, murmurs Daijo, but why? They were never meant to be stable enough to be put on skin, and all they do is absorb and slowly release the force of the surf so that the western-facing piers won't erode as quickly. Mahora hums in agreement before adding, yes, but look at how she's shifting their groundings. And their shape is similar to your originals, but see the way she's expanded them, complicated them. They are more flexible in this form. Carefully, Sakura connects the lines of the adapted key seals on her arms to the cluster of lines on her midriff. This is the tricky part. What she is slowly painting onto her skin needs to function as an extension of her chakra system, not an independent creation. Her seal has to be exact structurally and it has to line perfectly with her natural chakra network. If it does, then she should be able to avoid the standard degradation that comes with high-use corporal seals. If it's wrong, however, in theory or execution. No time to worry about that now. She looks back over the lines she's laid so far, double-checks each symbol and measures spacing with her eyes. Is that line 1/4 centimeter too far to the left? Was that anchor point supposed to be on that matrices or the one above it? Sakura shakes her head furiously. She's doubting herself. The seal is right, her theory is good. She hasn't actually tried this part yet, but she believes that it will work. All that's left to do is prove it and hope that it's enough for the masters watching her. Sakura puts the brush between her teeth and then she takes a deep breath and reaches into her chakra network. She sends a gentle pulse of energy into the lines swirling across her skin, and like a newborn, the seal breathes. There are several gasps of shock from her spectators as Sakura's seal lights gently, faint golden light sparking down its length and then fading, pulsing slightly. She ignores the reaction and focusing, lays the last few lines. Meridian path to energy dock. Balancing the yin reticulation against the lattice, stabilizing her chakra flow. She breathes all the air out of her lungs. The seal is done. She can feel the energy flowing gently through it and then circulating back into her body. It's working. She hopes that it's original enough of a creation to be worthy. She hopes she is enough to save her best friend. The Uzushio 11 are waiting in bated silence. My seal is called the Sentinel Seal. It absorbs force that comes into contact with my body, stores it for however long I need and then releases it at my will. In theory, I should be able to absorb an impact, and turn around and expel the force of the original blow. Simply put, if someone hits me, the Sentinel makes it so that I will hit them back with the same energy and then some. There is silence for several long moments, and for a second Sakura is terrified that it's not enough, that she fucked up or the seal is faulty or it uses too many pieces from other seals or... Holy shit, breathes Nami. And then the 11 greatest seal masters in Uzushio's history burst into noise. Yasumichi grabs her wrist and turns it forcefully, dragging a considerate finger over the lines on her wrist. Look, Deja. The way she's integrated and woven your key seal in with her chakra pathways. The other man nods and tapping against the lines on her wrist says yes, but here and here you can see the cache aspect is altered. Instead of a long-term slow release, this line and this pair of symbols will allow for a rapid-fire expulsion of energy. Kane Hiro, I believe it's dash. Kane Hiro is leaning over Deju and Yasumichi, his hair escaping its neat bun and his eyes bright. It's absolutely a mirror of my flying seals. But unlike the way that Tobirama adapted it, she's made it steadier, less volatile. Both of the other seal masters nod in agreement and Sakura would be more pleased with the praise, but on her other side Nami and Jin are leaning into her space as well. Nami trails her fingertips along the lines of ink on Sakura's stomach. If Sakura wasn't so overwhelmed, she'd maybe be more flustered about such a pretty girl touching her when she is wearing only her chest bindings, but... Nami's face suddenly lights up with joy. This part is drawing inspiration from Kushina's Jinchuriki seal. I can see its shadow in how you are incorporating the sentinel into your heart chakras. Is she the Uzumaki you arrived with? Sakura's blood freezes in her veins. Nami rambles on excitedly, not noticing Sakura's stricken expression. She was always shit at seals, would much rather punch something, the dim wild child. Gods, she must be old now. Almost 40, right? I always told her she'd get wrinkles before me even if she was 4 years younger than me. You'll have to tell her dash. She's dead, Nami-san, Sakura whispers. The chatter in the room dies instantly. Nami Uzumaki stares at her with wide, shocked eyes. Slowly her hands drop from where they had been gesturing excitedly and she fists the fabric of her pants. There is silence for several long moments. How long ago? Nami finally asks. 13 years. She died saving her son, my teammate, Naruto. Nami gives a half-hearted, watery laugh even as tears begin to run down her cheeks. She always said she'd never get married or have kids. I wonder what man decided to put up with her. The 11th Uzushio Seal Master wipes at her eyes furiously. Mahori reaches out and places a comforting hand on her shoulder while the rest of the gathered shades look on quietly. Nami takes a few steadying breaths and then meets Sakura's eyes. Her gaze is still teary but the blaze of her silver eyes is bright and fierce. You protect Kushina's son, okay? I failed to keep his mom safe, so you take over for me. That blade-like look is back in her eyes and her voice turns ugly as she snarls, the world has had its fair fucking share of Uzumaki blood. Sakura was always going to protect Naruto, she is here now to protect Naruto, but still, I swear it. Until my dying breath. Nami holds her eyes and then nods once sharply. Sakura can still see the mourning in Nami's eyes, the keen pain of loss. How lonesome, Sakura thinks, to be a ghost but to still have to watch as your loved ones leave this world without you. Iman breaks the silence, I believe we have a decision to make. Sakura, still crouched on the ground with ink drying on her skin and hair sticking to the back of her neck and heart in her throat, stares up at the masters around her. This is it. All those opposed to indoctrination, speak. Sakura closes her eyes. The silence in the crucible ceiling space is deafening. All those in support. Says Iman, and her eyes still aren't open but she can hear the smile in his voice. Sakura's mind is still processing the lack of opposition when 11 pronouncements of I come from all sides of her. Rise, Sakura Harano, 12th Seal Master of Uzushiagakur, pronounces Iman and the grin is even more obvious in his dry voice now. Sakura opens her eyes. She should probably be freaking out. Scratch that, she is freaking out. Should she put her shirt back on? Oh my god, if she's not going to die here then Kakashi is still definitely going to kill her when she leaves. Come on now, Nami's smile is still set around the edges but she looks proud. Stand up Sakura. You've just beaten my record of youngest ever Uzushio Seal Master. I don't know what to say. Sakura whispers hoarsely to the young Uzumaki and Nami just grins bigger, pulling her to her feet. Well, obviously you say you accept. I do accept. Sakura breathes out, and then louder, I do. I accept the position of a Seal Master and all that it entails. Nami props her hands on her hips and raising an eyebrow asks, then are you ready to officially join the club, kid? Don't call me kid, Sakura frowns distractedly even as she turns in confusion, feeling 10 different hands being laid against her back, her arm, her shoulder, the back of her neck. Hey, all these assholes made fun of me for being the youngest for years, your turn now, grins Nami, drawing her attention forward again. Sakura studies her. Naruto's first cousin, young and brilliant and killed far too young. She almost wants to apologize, to beg for forgiveness for what was done to the village that Nami must have loved enough to die for not being strong enough to seek revenge for her, for all the Uzushio Seal Masters. Seeing something in her face, Nami's eyes soften and her smile twists slightly, turns bittersweet. She lifts one of her hands and places it over Sakura's heart. Do us proud, kid. We'll be waiting here for you when you need us. Sakura nods sharply and then suddenly she is falling backwards. The ground opens under her and darkness sweeps in to fill the edges of her vision. The last she sees of the crucible ceiling space is Nami's bright grin as she holds a thumbs up. Goddamn Uzumakis, Sakura thinks before she slams back into her body with all the delicacy of a star falling to earth. Sakura comes to gasping. She's on her side and she feels like absolute shit. Her legs are completely dead and her back and shoulders are aching terrible. Her mouth is dry, she has to piss so badly she might die, and the back of her neck hurts like someone has put a branding iron against it. Sakura? Are you with us? It's Sasuke. He's using the "I'm a medic and thus I am very calm right now" voice that he pulls out sometimes when one of them gets hurt, but even it's shaky. Sakura tries to say I'm fine and instead just manages a pathetic gurgle, her dry throat failing to get with the program. Here, water. Sasuke passes her a flask and she drinks deeply and gratefully. Kakashi is next to Sasuke, watching her carefully with both his regular eye and the Sharingan. He looks relieved but his face is drawn and there are dark bags under his eyes. Good to see you, kiddo, he says quietly and he sounds so relieved that Sakura blinks in confusion. How long was she out for? Interrupting her confusion, Sasuke, pulling a small penlight from his pouch, explains, I need to ask you a few quick questions. Can you follow the light with your eyes while I do? I'd like to check to make sure all your faculties are operating normally. Sakura nods, flask still in her hands and body still aching immensely. What's your name and age? Sakura Harano, I'm 14. Where are you right now? The Ozashio Mountain Archives, in the chamber housing the crucible seal. So that's what the damn thing is called, Kakashi murmurs, sending the seal an acrid glare even as Suzuki peers at both of her eyes closely, shining the light in one and then the other. Dizziness? Disorientation? Any trouble taking deep breaths? No, none of that. I do feel like I got kicked down a flight of stairs though, Sakura bemoans. Yes, my informed opinion is that sitting on a stone floor for 17 fucking hours will do that. Sakura, in the middle of taking another swallow from the flask, nearly spits water in shock. Did you say 17 hours? Suzuki hums non-committally and then responds, one more quick question. She nods in distracted shock. 17 hours? Sakura could have sworn she was in the seal for less than 20 minutes. What in the world? How much do you need as a fair head start before I kick your ass for scaring us like that? Suzuki asks. She jerks her head up to meet his eyes. Under all his calm medic persona, Suzuki looks furious. His Sherry-non eyes are spinning steadily in the low lights of the chamber and the dark circles he spouts like Kakashi makes his gaze practically glow with anger. Ah, Sakura answers eloquently. With the look in her teammate's eyes, maybe she doesn't have to worry about Kakashi killing her after all. Suzuki may just do the job for him. I must have missed a temporal phase in the seal. It was only 17 minutes in the time of the sealing space, but translated, she raises a hand to rub sheepishly at the back of her neck. I'm sorry, I really wasn't trying to worry you. I dash. The moment her palm makes contact with the skin of her neck, Sakura's vision tunnels. She lurches forward with a gasp of shock. Suzuki and Kakashi's hands instantly reaching to steady her are the only things that keep her from hitting the ground. Sakura. Suzuki's hands light green and immediately raise to begin a damaged skin of her body. She waves him off, shaking her head. No, I'm okay. It's fine. Actually, it's more than fine. She must be grinning like a loon from the way that Kakashi and Suzuki both are looking at her like she's insane. It is not fine. Suzuki hisses, his anger temporarily replaced with worry as he lifts his hands again to do a sweep over her. Sakura ignores her teammate's mothering. She knows that he won't feel better until he can see for himself that there is nothing wrong with her aside from some aches and rising exhaustion. As he busies himself with checking her over, Sakura raises her gaze to meet Kakashi's. I figured it out, sensei. He offers her a questioning hum and she can see in the tightness at the corner of his mouth, in the rigid arch of his eyebrows, that he is mad at her too. She still can't bring herself to regret the risk she took for even a moment. I passed the crucible. I figured out how to fix the 8 trigrams. I know how to save Naruto. Kakashi's eyes widen and at the same moment Suzuki sweeps her hair off the back of her neck to do a scan of her brain stem. He freezes. Sakura, he whispers, what is this? She knows what he's seeing instinctually even though she's never laid eyes on it herself. It's a seal, simple but stark. It's shaped in a mirror of the Ozashio spiral, however at its center, not quite kanji but still somehow eligible, is the word master. Kakashi doesn't move to look. He simply studies her silently for several long moments. Sakura finds that she cares about his judgment more than she did about the one that gave her the mark that now rests on the back of her neck, more than the title that rests on her shoulders. She waits, barely able to breathe. Finally, Kakashi's face cracks into an honest, crooked smile and he remarks, turns out you didn't need me to make your dream come true after all. You turned yourself into a threat all on your own. He places a hand on her shoulder, I'm so proud of you. Sakura, to her eternal mortification, bursts into tears and throws herself into her sensei's arms. She knows she's babbling a million things at once, about how scared she was and how she didn't know what else to do and how she would have never in a million years been able to accomplish all this without his belief in her. Kakashi just wraps his strong, lean arms around her and smiles even as she gets snot and tears on his shirt and her hair gets in his face. After a few moments she feels Suzuki's hand join, rubbing slow, comforting circles on her lower back. She simply lets herself fold. After 5 months of working herself to the bone and being constantly terrified that she wouldn't be able to find a solution and that Naruto would die because she wasn't enough, Sakura finally feels like she can take a full breath. After her tears subside enough, she sits back on her heels. Sasuke wraps an arm around her shoulders and she is shaky enough still that she is endlessly glad for the support. To answer your earlier question, Sasuke, she explains around sniffles, the tattoo marks me as a seal master, and when I touch it, it connects me to the collected wisdom of every master who has come before me, stored here in the crucible seal. Sasuke blinks again, finally manages, medical jutsu is weird sometimes but your fuinjutsu shit is straight up batshit insane. Sakura shrugs. She has no arguments with that. So what's the plan for the 8 trigrams? Kakashi asks. Well, the whole thing is going to take too long to explain now, but basically we are going to need a medicnin, a really talented one. Sasuke, you've gotten good, but what I'm going to do? I need someone who is the best. Kakashi groans. Sakura tilts her head at him in confusion. That was not the response she was expecting at all. It has to be a skilled medic? You don't need an artist or maybe a woodworker. She shakes her head slowly, still absolutely baffled. And Sasuke can't do it? No, he's talented but... Sasuke interrupts her. I know my limits. I won't risk Naruto over something as foolish as my pride. We find a medic with more experience to help Sakura with whatever this is. Kakashi's head drops forward in defeat and he sighs long and slow. I know the kunoichi we need, but we're going to have to find her and we're going to have to bring a lot of sake for when we do. Sakura raises an eyebrow. Is the sake for her or for you? Yes. Kakashi answers miserably. Sakura laughs loudly. She's sweaty and exhausted and she almost died today, but she's a seal master and she is going to save her best friend. Things are looking up. Chapter 28, Fly Away. Fu is dreaming. Or, not quite dreaming, but she somehow understands that she's not awake either. She also understands that is a good thing because awake is bad. Awake means she forgets. Here in the strange, warped, blankness of her consciousness, she searches. She's looking for something, or maybe someone. She can't remember exactly, but she can hear a distant sound like the wind through 1,000 blades of grasses or the beat of locust wings or the chime of high, sweet, bells or maybe even a voice. It's calling to her from so far away that it's barely there, but it's important that she finds it. She has to find it. Not finding it is going to kill her. A foreign feeling breaks through the haze of the lucid dream, all terror/hope/desperation. It's a shout. Fear, you have to listen to me, have to fight it. I'm here. I haven't left you. Can you hear me? Few. You're a Jinchuriki. Don't let them make you forget. The wind grows stronger. Few starts to run. She can feel breath on her neck and feet pounding after her and she knows she has to get away. She has to find Kome. She leaps for the sky, hands stretching towards freedom and she wakes up, sitting bolt upright in bed as thin sheets tangle around her like bindings and her pastel green hair sticks to her forehead with sweat. She was dreaming. She was dreaming and she can feel that it was about something important, that there was someone calling for her. Someone was trying to tell her something that she needs to remember. What did they say she was? It's a word, a concept that she recognized, that felt right and real and... Phew? Are you okay? The genin gasps and spins to the side of the bed, her heart hammering in instinctual terror. No, she has to run, she has to get away before. A hand drops gently, firmly, onto the bare skin of her arm and Fu's panic vanishes like mist under the noon sun. Haruka? What's dash? Her tongue feels like lead and her mind feels like iron. She's slow and so tired and it's wrong but she doesn't know why. Haruka, familiar, dark-haired with soft brown eyes and long delicate fingers, reaches to swipe some of Fu's tangled bangs off her brow. At the gesture the feeling of wrongness fades from Fu even further until it's as distant as the dream, as unimportant. She takes a shaky breath. Haruka gives a pleasant hum and then explains gently, you've been sick, dear. Everyone in the village has been very worried. That must be why Fu is so tired, why her head feels like it's stuffed full of cotton. Sick. She parrots, wanting more information but not sure how to ask for it. Nodding and continuing to gently untangle Fu's hair with careful fingers, Haruka clarifies, yes, there was an accident and we've been taking care of you. I'm in charge of watching over you right now and making sure nothing more goes wrong. An accident? Fu doesn't remember an accident, but, as she goes to sit up further, there is a bolt of agony across her stomach. Glancing down in sudden panic, she's met with the sight of a thick wrap of bandages around her midriff. She grits her teeth against a groan of pain and reaches with shaking fingers to begin trying to untie the bandages, to actually see what's wrong with her. Haruka, tutaying worriedly, grabs her hands and pulls them away. Fu slumps and tries to puzzle through her clouded thoughts. Yes, an accident and I got hurt, right? Fu is still so unsteady, still so uncertain, she wants to get something, anything, right. Yes, dear. You are so special to all of us and we were very worried for you. Haruka smiles brightly at her. Fu is racking her brain, trying desperately to remember more details about where the wound came from. Suddenly a memory pierces through her mind's fog, clear and sharp even in her confusion, almost like it was sent from someone else. I was trying to run, wasn't I? I was trying to leave Taki and I was almost over the wall, but you and old man Senji caught me and dash. Haruka grasps her hands tighter. For a moment her nails dig sharply into her skin and Fu flinches back from the pain, back from the twisted, spiteful look in the other shinobi's eyes. No, dear. You're remembering wrong. Her voice is so kind, so certain, and Fu finds herself blinking in confusion. She must have seen wrong. Haruka's eyes are so gentle. I am. Still grasping her hands, the other woman nods sagely. You and Kigon and Yoro were on the wall having some silly competition to see who could balance the longest on the edge and you fell and landed wrong. It was terrifying for everyone. That can't be right, Fu thinks, because... But, I don't fall. Haruka laughs as if she's told a joke and Fu frowns. She wants to move her hands away from where they are being held. She doesn't know how. Laughter still slipping through her words, Haruka grins. Oh Fu. I do love how silly you are. Why wouldn't you be able to fall just like the rest of us, dear? Fu opens her mouth to answer, the words sharp and bright on her tongue like light off a gilded carapace, like the sting of a bee, but, she pauses, falters, because what she was about to say couldn't possibly be right. Yes. Haruka prompts, and it's almost like there's a mocking tone to that, but, no, because Haruka is nice, is kind, and is Fu's friend. What were you going to say, dear? Fu shakes her head. Nothing. You're right, I guess. Because Fu is just a regular human and still only 15 years old at that, only a genin. She can't fly, that would be a ridiculous answer. Right? Nodding in satisfaction, Haruka tugs on Fu's hands and guides her to standing. The pain is still there, racing across the surface of Fu's stomach and then burrowing deep into her veins like a toxin. How could she have gotten such a strange injury from falling, she wonders, opens her mouth to ask as much and then, furrows her brow, confused. What was she going to say? She can't remember. Come on, dear, Haruka is saying cheerily, let's go tell Shibuki-sama that you're up. Fu doesn't want to do that, but for some reason she nods blearily anyway and lets herself be pulled out of the room and into the hallway. She still feels like there is something that she is supposed to be paying attention to. There is a sharp hum in her ears and her chakra lurches and stutters through her body almost sickly. She feels nauseous. She feels like half her senses have been muted. Do you hear that humming sound? She asks Haruka, almost desperate even through her blurriness. The other shinobi, what was her rank again? How does Fu know her? Why does she have such a cold look in her eyes, frowns at Fu and then, shaking her head, tells her, you must be imagining things. She pulls them along even faster towards Shibuki-sama's office. Fu thinks that it may be strange that she's staying in the village head's personal residence, but the thought slips through her fingers like water. They reach Shibuki's office quickly and Haruka taps a quick and irregular series of knocks against the thick wooden door. Jonin code, some buried, struggling part of Fu's consciousness whispers, Jonin code because she's not your friend, she's here on orders, she's your guard. Fu frowns and twists her wrist half-heartedly in Haruka's hold. The other woman doesn't even glance at her, simply pretending that Fu's kitten-weak struggles aren't even happening. A voice bids them enter from inside the room and Fu's captor, no, No, her friend, Haruka is her friend, opens the door and guides them inside. Shivuki is sitting on the bamboo floor in front of a low table crowded with scrolls. The sliding doors behind him are open to the house's wrap-around porch, and the view of the village of Waterfall spread out beyond is beautiful. Fu's stomach lurches with nausea again at the sight of it. Something inside her screams, cries, this is not where she is supposed to be. This is not her village anymore. A warm spring breeze gusts through the room, the wind tugging at her hair and clothes. The humming in her ears grows louder, and she takes a subconscious, longing step towards the open door, towards the wide, endless blue sky beyond. Haruka tightens her grip on her wrist so much that Fu could swear she hears bones creak. Shivuki looks up from the report in front of him. His normally handsome face is exhausted and tense, and his eyes, which Fu would have once called friendly, are calculating when they look at her, cold, just like Haruka. Suddenly Fu is blindingly furious with the man who had helped raise her, trained her. She wants to scream at him, wants to rip his arm off so he understands what grounding her, caging her, has felt like. She wants to. Dizziness sweeps through her in a wave, and her thoughts fly apart into nothingness. She sways weakly, and only the arms that Haruka had wrapped around her when Fu lunged towards Shivuki keep her on her feet. The village head sighs long and low, and then, addressing Haruka, he says, so it's not going well then. Haruka's voice is professional but still noticeably strained when she responds. No. She was doing fine for the first few minutes after she woke, outside of a few minor slips, but the longer she's been awake the more chakra I've been having to pour into the Amity Genjutsu. Shivuki runs an exhausted hand over his face. We are going to have to find another solution. This isn't working, and Taki cannot afford to lose the Nanabi right now. What would you suggest? Haruka hisses, professionalism cracking. You were the one who wanted to make sure we kept her treatment humane. You tried to convince her to stay instead of putting her down when she tried to leave like all the other runaway monsters in the first place. We may not be in this position if you had just dash. Shivuki's voice is hard when he cuts her off. You may think me soft-hearted, Haruka, but I understand my weaknesses more than you know, and as village head I will put Taki's needs before anything else. Right now, with the way that Earth is amassing troops and fire is gearing for war, our closed borders won't hold for much longer. They're going to force us to open them, and then when they go for each other's throats they're going to crush us under their boots between them. Bitterly, Haruka recites, when giants fight, ants die. Shivuki finishes the expression quietly. The young leader of Taki looks to Fu. She doesn't understand what's happening right now. She can hear the words but she can't process their meaning. However, Fu is still a shinobi, and a damn good one at that, and her instincts are screaming that the way Shivuki is looking at her, the way that Haruka's hands haven't left her once since she woke up, is bad. She's scared. She's scared and she wants to fly away. Sighing again like what he's about to say pains him, Shivuki orders, have Senji reinforce the suppression on her Jinchura key seal. I don't care if it damages the thing, or even if it's dangerous, this time he has to lock it down. Bury the Nanabi in its chakra. Fu needs to be unable to feel the damned thing until we are ready to use them. The word Nanabi is ringing like bells in Fu's mind, and the voice from her dream is back, if still muted. Like someone shouting from behind a wall. No, no, Fu and the faint foreign voice in her mind both rebel fiercely against Shivuki's words. They can't let it happen. They are a being of the air, of freedom, of light, they cannot be chained in the darkness. Fu's consciousness writhes against the fog binding it, reaches desperately for the voice behind the wall, screaming, Kome. Her mind, her chakra, her very soul, slams into a barrier, and the wound in her stomach explodes with pain so white-hot that Fu thinks this must be what dying feels like. Her knees buckle. There are voices shouting in the room, more than just Haruka and Shivuki now, but she can't make out any specifics. Her world is a wash of too bright color and too loud sound and too much pain. The only thing she can hear clearly is a terrified voice somewhere from deep inside her calling her name again and again and again. And then the world fades fully into blackness and Fu doesn't hear anything anymore. Han crouches on a hill a few miles outside of Taki's village walls and tries to fight down the tide of worry he feels. Kokuo is prancing with unease in her ceiling space, the tap of her hooves more comfort than distraction after all these years. It's not good, is it, Han-chan? The dolphin horse inquires, though she knows as well as he does the position they are in. Still, Han has always believed in trying to be at least cordial with his tailed beast, so he hums a quiet agreement as he continues to study the walls of Taki. That barrier they have set, we can't get through it, can we? What if we missed it? I know it is a new aspect of my abilities for you, all things considered, but I did tell you I would give you full access to my powers, as you have proven your friendship by coming here to save my older sister and her vessel, and it seems to me that perhaps even with such an all-encompassing wall that dash. Han has also always believed in the value of silence, so he hums again, sharper, to cut off what would certainly devolve into a further spill of anxieties and formalities if he let Kokuo continue as she had been. The Goba snaps her mouth shut and blinks at Han with large, pearl-scent eyes, waiting for his response. Turning into steam won't work to get through that barrier. I've seen it before when IWA fought in Frost during the war. It will block activated chakra. Kokuo blows a dense cloud of steam in agitation and goes back to pacing. Han can feel through the bond that she's trying to remain calm while he looks for a way into the city. He does appreciate the consideration. Han is a man of few words, and for a spirit of water Kokuo is unbelievable long-winded. Before he had defected from IWA, he and Kokuo's relationship had been tense if still effective. Han was a good soldier, a model Jinchuriki. He had kept his tailed beast at a distance and Kokuo kept her tongue. Han didn't even realize how miserable the both of them were until Kurama and Naruto, and then Yujito, Matatabi, Gaara, and Shukaku in their wake, fled their villages. When he had grasped that something was afoot with the other Jinchuriki, he had stepped into the ceiling space and for the first time ever told Kokuo he was ready to try to understand the Goba's perspective. The decision to leave IWA had been easy after that very long conversation. Koka can talk a lot, and above everything, Han is a good listener. The months of traveling after, of seeing the other great nations through the eyes of a traveler and not a soldier, have been the happiest Han has ever been. The balance he and Koka have struck is good and strong, and he appreciates her companionship more than he could ever say, but something is still missing. When Matatabi had reached out to Koka through the strange connection that the Biju seemed to share with one another, explaining that one of them, another Jinchuriki, needed help, Han had started to suspect what the missing thing is. He wants to save Fu. He can barely sense the little girl or her tailed beast, the connection dampened, but it's still there, and something about the whirlwind, open sky, ringing bell, joy he can feel echoing from whatever binds him to Kome/Fu makes Han feel warm, maybe. He's not really sure. He thought for a long time that after the blood-soaked, bone-cracking underfoot, steam-cooked corpses, battlefields of the Third Shinobi War, that he'd never feel anything but numb again. But now, a complication. There has to be a way in, Koka says. The anxious strain is audible in her voice even without the restless/frustrated/fearful cloud of emotions that Han can feel radiating from her. There is, Han agrees, and then at the hopefulness that floods through his companion he points one large, heavy hand towards their best way into the city. That is. Han-chan, please pardon my confusion, but you are pointing at the front gate. Han hums in agreement, settling his hands back on his knees. I don't know if we could just go through the front gate. There are a lot of shinobi there and we are certainly very strong, but with just the two of us against the entire village I feel that perhaps we won't. It's a death sentence. Han's worry rises and this time twines with a pulse of annoyance. He's studied Taki for several hours now and he knows there is no other way in and that they will need backup, but Fu is so close. He can feel her energy radiating from the base of the massive tree at the center of Taki. It's faint and distinctly unwell, but she's there in Han. Han takes a deep breath. He'll be no good to her if he's dead. Han stands and rolls his broad shoulders to resettle the armor he wears. Koka, can you pass a message along to Matatabi? The Goba nods agreeably and starts to open her mouth. Before she can trot off into another dissertation, Han pushes on. Tell them that I'm going to come meet them in Uzushio and then we're going to come back here together. I can't get in alone, but no village can stand against 5 of us at once. Goba huffs out another wave of steam and she smiles gratefully at Han. We'll get them both out. They'll be okay. Han hums and tries to suppress the wave of anxiety that has nothing to do with his tailed beast and everything to do with the green-haired girl hurting somewhere beyond those walls. He doesn't really understand how this Jinchuriki connection works yet, but nevertheless, he reaches beyond himself, into the village of Waterfall and sends comfort, sends calm, Sense strength. Hold on, Fyu, he thinks, hoping that it maybe finds her. Hold on a little longer. We are coming to get you. In the heart of Taki, Fyu is again dreaming. She runs, the grass under her feet burning, the seal on her stomach burning. Komei is calling for her, but Fyu can't find her in all the smoke and her wings are missing. But a new voice drifts through the haze and Fyu stops for a moment, panting. The voice is deep and rolling and familiar in a way that a stranger shouldn't be. Hold on, he says. We are coming to get you, he says. The flames circle Fyu with a roar and Fyu chokes on smoke. She's tired, so tired. She wants to lay down and rest. But she can't, she won't. Because the others are coming. Wind sweeps down the dreamscape and Komei's voice grows loud again, begging her to fight, to run, to remember. I am a Jinchuriki and it will take more than this to kill me, Fyu thinks fiercely, and with a smoke-filled breath and steps that scream with agony, she takes off running again. Chapter 29, What You're Trying to Hide. It's late when Asuma pops his head into the crowded offices that the Team 7 retrieval unit inhabits. Shikamaru is deeply entrenched in the newest border report out of Suna. He could have sworn he has only been combing through the stacks of information on bandit activity, immigration and emigration, weather conditions, imports and more for only a few hours. However, when the quiet knock comes at the slightly ajar entrance to the office and he finds his sensei standing in the doorway with one raised eyebrow, Shikamaru realizes it may have been a bit longer than that. He glances at the clock on the wall. Damn, I missed the last call for file requests from the personnel archives. His voice is scratchy from misuse. Has it really been 3 hours since Ino and Tamari and the others left for the night? At the comment, Asuma's second eyebrow joins his first at his hairline. You missed it by a wide margin, kid. They close at 7. You think you'd remember that with how often I hear you're there asking the archivist shinobi for things. Shikamaru runs a frustrated hand through his tangled hair. It's gotten longer over the past 7 months, long enough for his old gravity-defying poof to not be an option anymore. These days he tends to favor a tight bun to keep it out of his face and off his neck. I'd be there a lot less if they actually listened worth a damn to my requests, he grumbles, not even trying to hide his deep-seated annoyance with the archival staff out of his tone. Shikamaru's ongoing tiff with the shinobi in charge of the active duty and service record archives is rapidly becoming a problem. No matter how many times the leader of the Team 7 retrieval unit has asked for the complete and up-to-date files on Kakashi, Naruto, and Sasuke, the personnel archives seem completely unable to comply. Between missing pages from the files themselves, enough red tape to mummify a man, and the borderline incompetence of the ninja staffing the archive itself, Shikamaru is only a hair's breadth away from saying fuck bureaucracy and breaking into the damn building to find the files himself. Unaware of the discontent simmering in his dark-haired student, Asuma steps through the door and carefully makes his way through the office. He has to turn his broad shoulders several times to slip through the teetering stacks of files and books that crowd the small space. Finally reaching Shikamaru's desk, Asuma pulls a chair from Ino's workstation. Her space is currently buried under tentative, less than official psych evals on the various members of Team 7, courtesy of one of her many cousins in the psychiatric corps. With a glance at the mess, Asuma settles in across from the Nara genius. He taps a questioning finger against the ashtray that's recently taken up residence among the otherwise constantly shifting contents of Shikamaru's desk. You're a little young for that, you know. Asuma tells him reproachfully. Shika frowns back, aware that it's slightly petulant and too worn down to wrangle the expression into something less annoyed. Sensei, remind me, when did you start smoking again? Asuma flinches and then rubs the back of his neck sheepishly. Different times, kid. There was a war going on then. Shikamaru's frown deepens, slips from annoyed to judgmental. And there isn't now. Asuma doesn't try and argue with that point. Both of them have become regular attendants at the bi-weekly meetings that Danzo holds among the various unit heads and important jonin of the village. The increasingly concerning reports on skirmishes along Fire Country's border with Sound, of troops from IWA being spotted in growing numbers in Grass Country, of the Land of Waterfalls closing its borders, and even whispers of what may be an approaching coup attempt in Kiri, all go to show that the tedious balance among the great elemental nations is faltering and tipping towards open conflict. Losing 5 Jinchuriki in the span of fewer than 4 months had started a chain reaction that is quickly becoming explosive. Seemingly giving up on berating Shika for his new habit, Asuma lights a cigarette of his own and leans back in his chair with his arms crossed. He breathes deep and slow, eyes closed. Shikamaru's mind cannot help but catch on the dark circles under his teacher's eyes, on the deep creases in his flak jacket that suggest he hasn't hung it up in several days, in the nearly imperceptible shake to his broad, boxy fingers as he pulls the cigarette from his mouth and blows a ring of smoke. It's been 7 months since the third Hokage died and the village is still trying to recover from the loss, as is his son. You should go home and rest, sensei. Asuma shoots Shikamaru a falsely cheerful smile before faltering under his student's ruthlessly discerning gaze. It's just further proof of how worn down Asuma is that he would even try to fool Shiko like that. I'd say I'm fine but you'd just bitch at me for lying, the Jonin grumbles around the cigarette between his teeth, then shaking the dark look off his face he leans forward and taps on the report between them. Any closer to finding Haytake? Shikamaru narrows his eyes slightly and files away the way that Asuma snarls Kakashi's name, the way he subconsciously grinds his cigarette between his teeth. Shikamaru knows his sensei is a good man and a good shinobi. He's not worried that Asuma will do anything rash but still. The look in his teacher's eyes is darker and crueler than Shikamaru would have ever guessed the other man capable of. Shikamaru shakes his head as an answer. Even with all the information we're sifting through, I haven't found the needle in the haystack that'll point towards where they've gone yet. His sensei reaches across the desk and drops a massive hand onto his shoulder. You'll figure it out. Shikamaru closes his eyes and thinks of Naruto, young and grinning as the paint bombs went off in their academy classroom. He remembers Sasuke, younger even still and frowning as they sparred under Iruka's watchful eyes. He pictures Sakura's back, dawnlight catching on her pink hair and steady shoulders as she jogged away from him on that last, fateful day. He remembers the sound of explosions. I will, he tells Asuma, and he means it. This is something he will do because he refuses any other option. He will not lose again. Perhaps sensing the heaviness plaguing his student, Asuma concocts another slightly strained smile and offers, I hear that with all the information you've been sifting through you've become something of a reference for shinobi sent on missions that take them outside of the land of fire. The Nara genius has to fight down a grimace at the reminder. It's flattering in some regards that his fellow Leaf Nin thinks so highly of his team's ability to gather intel, but it's also been slowing them down. I know that with the increase in external missions it's been necessary, but I really wish the actual intelligence unit would get their shit together and meet the demand themselves. I didn't sign up to do other people's work for them. Asuma's laugh is loud and honest. You were really made to be a bureaucrat, weren't you, kid? Shikamaru just shrugs. He doesn't know how to tell Asuma that beyond finding Team 7, beyond understanding why they ran, why they left behind everything, Shikamaru doesn't know much about what he is made for at all anymore. His belief is shaken. Changing the subject before Asuma can pry further into dangerous territory, the genius asks, how long are you in the village for? Lord Danzo has been running you pretty ragged lately. Puffing out a cloud of cigarette smoke, his sensei sighs. Only until tomorrow afternoon. I'm leading a 3-man squad to T-Country to find one of Dad's former students. Shikamaru arches an eyebrow in surprise. Another one of the Sannin. Asuma nods in confirmation. Tsunade Senjo, the medic. She left the village years ago and the Lord Fifth wants to bring her back into the fold. Well, good luck. With how things are looking on our borders recently, having a world-class medic back in Konoha's ranks is probably a good idea. It's the right answer and analytically correct, but the words taste bitter to Shikamaru. Instead of the pleasantries, he wants to demand that his sensei explain why the Leaf and her Hokage seem to be quietly gearing for large-scale conflict. Why they are restaffing the medical corps and buffing patrols along the borders and increasing missions into disputed territories. Shikamaru wants to know why Tamari walked into the office a week ago with the news that Konoha and Suna had apparently signed a non-armament agreement which included the promise of a union when conflict broke out with the other elemental nations. Not if. When. Shikamaru wants to know why no one is trying to stop the rapidly approaching Fourth Shinobi War. But he doesn't say any of that. The Nara genius rubs a hand firmly against his forehead, hoping to suppress the tension headache that's beginning to bloom under the brunt of his agitated mind. Sometimes he wishes that he was stupid like everyone else, that every little piece of information didn't get captured and processed and incorporated into the constantly spinning jumble of plans and theories and conjectures that his brain is offering every single second. Shikamaru closes his eyes for just a moment, breathing the cigarette smoke from Asuma's light deep into his lungs, and he tries to quiet his mind, even if just for a moment. He's reminded quickly why he prefers the noise, why prefers working himself until he's physically too exhausted to remain awake, why he can't slow down for even a second. Because the moment his whirling mind quiets enough to be manageable, he hears his own stupid voice saying so many months ago now, "You can trust me, Sakura," and he can see the way her sharp, impossible eyes had dissected his words, his intentions, and had found that statement to be a lie. Everyone who saw Shikamaru's dedication to finding Team 7 thought that his drive comes from the shame of being a genius who was outsmarted, or from a dedication to his village, or, if you're Ino, from a borderline medical incompatibility with being wrong ever, and those things were certainly part of it. But it's more than that. It's that for all the things that Shikamaru knows, all the useless facts that his brain offers him on the daily, that the baker near his apartment is cheating on her husband, that Asuma and Kurane have been fighting again, that Suna is going to see a spike in their rice costs in a few weeks, that the Umbu who's been at the last 3 meetings Danzo has held is new to the force, that Irika-sensei hasn't been sleeping as much as he should, that, for all his genius, he is utterly in the dark as to why Sakura Harino looked at him and decided unilaterally and unflinchingly that he was a threat. Why she and the rest of her team decided to run instead of reaching out to their allies, their comrades, for help. He breathes deeply again, letting the second-hand nicotine steady him. He's not the only one with stakes in this, he reminds himself. His entire unit has questions they want answered, scores they want settled, their worth proved, and he's going to get that for them. Asuma shifts in his chair and the creak of the wood is loud in the quiet of the office. Even in the midst of his frustration, Shikamaru is struck with gratitude for his sensei. Most adults try and fill silence when they encounter it. They try and chatter on at him or ask banal questions or just be generally bothersome. But Asuma knows him well enough to let the silence be just that, to let Shikamaru's mind run its course and to wait till he's ready to talk again. He's a good sensei and a good Konoha shinobi. Shikamaru is considering telling him that when something shifts in the room. To anyone else the change would be so minimal as to be invisible, but no detail is too small for the Nara, nothing slips past without at least some part of him cataloging the information. And so when the smoke in the room thickens almost imperceptibly, when the smell drifts faintly from the sweetness of nicotine to something more acrid, Shikamaru sits upright. His thoughts, never still but often scattered, focus to a razor's edge in an instant. Asuma blinks at whatever expression must be on his face and asks Shika. "There's a fire nearby," he answers, trying to listen for any sounds that may clue him into more details. The village alarm that screams to life is a hell of a clue. The 2 members of Team 10 leap from their chairs and are through the door in only moments. Shikamaru would be more annoyed by the sound of one of his carefully organized towers of files hitting the ground behind them if the smell of smoke that hits them in the breezeway wasn't so distractingly strong. The alarms are coming from near Hokage Tower. Asuma shouts, taking to the roofs with a powerful leap, Shikamaru on his heels. The pillar of smoke is clearly visible even against the blackness of the night sky. Shikamaru realizes the source of the smoke just a moment before Asuma does, and of course he does. He's been here a half-dozen times a week for months after all. The personnel archives are nothing but a column of flame by the time Asuma and Shikamaru come to a stop in the road. The heat from the fire is scorching enough that even from more than 30 feet away Shikamaru feels like the flesh is peeling off of his face. Several Umbu are already here. A mongoose-masked shinobi nearby is holding a glowing green hand over the throat of one of the overnight workers who's coughing harshly. Another Umbu has his arm around the waist of Mitsuo, the archive director, as he leads the man away from the flames. Shikamaru jogs over. "Mitsuo-san." The middle-aged Chunin jerks his head up at Shikamaru's voice and there is the briefest flash of sharp panic to his face before it smooths out into something more appropriately fearful. Shikamaru's eyes are too sharp to miss the slip, however. His stomach drops and instead of a smoke-filled, dark street, for a moment he imagines a plant-filled, sunlit store. He imagines a different pair of eyes. "Is everyone out?" Shikamaru demands loudly as he stops in front of the 2 shinobi. The roar of the flames makes it nearly impossible to hear his own voice. "Mitsuo, soot-stained and coughing, slightly shakes his head. The white of his eyes are stark and frightened in his blackened face. Ikaki was in the lower storage rooms when we smelled smoke. I tried yelling for him, but he's cut off by another coughing fit. Shit, hisses Shikamaru, spinning to the raging inferno that was once the place all files on Konoha's past missions and shinobi were stored. Do you have anyone who can get in? He shouts to the Umbu at Mitsuo's side, a burly-looking man with a hawk mask. Hawk stares at Shikamaru and then turns his masked face towards the building just as there is a crash and explosion of burning embers, a part of the structure collapsing. He doesn't use any words and the traditional porcelain Umbu mask is emotionless as always, but Shikamaru hears the message loud and clear. Ikaki, short, thick glasses, archivist in charge of all the documentation on Konoha's clans and still constantly bringing Shikamaru the wrong files, is as good as dead. Shikamaru looks away from the flames, clenching his eyes against their brightness and stinging smoke for a moment before focusing back on Mitsuo. What happened? There it is again, that flash of panic. This time Mitsuo's eyes dart fearfully for a fraction of a second to the Umbu still supporting him and then back to Shikamaru before he wrangles his expression under control. Shikamaru narrows his eyes. I'm not exactly sure. Lie. We were here late sorting some files and fulfilling withdrawal requests, yours included, and we started smelling smoke. Truth. I don't know what happened, or how the fire started. Lie. We tried to put it out. Lie. But it spread so fast and we had no choice but to get out. Truth. Mitsuo hangs his head and tears begin to cut clean tracks down his dirty cheeks. We had to leave Ikaki, we didn't have any other choice, do you understand? We had to. His voice is rising now and his eyes are wide, slightly wild. Shikamaru, fire at his back, feels his breath catch in his lungs. What his fellow shinobi is trying to communicate without outright saying it is as clear to him as the ashes that cover the other man's face. Mitsuo and the archival staff were under orders to abandon one of their own to the flames. That's what Mitsuo is trying to tell him, but if that's true then it means that the fire isn't a random tragedy. Even further, maybe it means that the months of delays and red tape and hurdles to get the information Shikamaru has needed on Team 7. Maybe that wasn't random misfortune either. Maybe there is something more sinister at work. The hawk-masked Umbu tightens an arm around Mitsuo even as the older man droops, panting. Mitsuo-san, we need to get you to the hospital, Hawk says before turning to Shikamaru. Other Umbu will be here soon to make sure the fire stays contained. Until then you remain and act as support. Shikamaru nods shortly. He's not one for prayer, but in this moment he begs every deity that he's ever heard of that his suspicions aren't obvious on his face. Hawk stares at him for a few beats longer and then says quietly, "Watch yourself, Shikamaru Nara." Without another word he turns and leaps away towards Konoha General with Mitsuo. Shikamaru stares at their retreating backs for several long beats. He shifts and watches as a few dozen Konoha shinobi, Asuma included, wrestle hoses from a nearby water tank and begin dousing the inferno. Shikamaru already knows that the fire will take hours to put out, and by the time they do, everything in the archives will be gone. More than 30 years of information lost to the flames. The entire personal histories of Team 7 and what was likely the best, most accessible key to figuring out why they abandoned the village, reduced to ash. Shikamaru faces the flames. He takes a deep breath, full of smoke, full of heat. Not everything is lost. He's learned a few critically important things tonight after all. The first is that Asuma is holding a dangerous grudge against Hatake, a grudge that for the first time ever makes Shikamaru doubt the extent to which he can trust his sensei. The second is that all the months of red tape and walls that he and the rest of the Team 7 retrieval unit have come up against are not accidental. Something more is at play here. Someone in a position of power in the Leaf is trying to keep them from looking too deeply into the disappearance. The third and the most important, the most earth-shattering, is this. Whoever is pulling the strings, whoever is making it so Shikamaru cannot do what he swore to do, that person is more than willing to kill innocent Konoha shinobi to keep the truth hidden. There is another loud crash as the archive roof partially collapses, sending a wave of sparks towards the dark heavens. Shikamaru tracks their burning progression. He feels surprisingly calm. Even faced with the death of a comrade, even knowing that death was not an accident, Even knowing that there is someone in Konoha's government implicated in that death, Shikamaru breathes the smoke and feels steady. He's not going to go to the Hokage with this yet. He needs to bring his unit into the know first, and he needs to gather more information. More than any of that, now more than ever he needs to find the truth as to what caused Team 7 to run. Shikamaru feels like he's teetering on the edge of something huge, some massive web of secrets that is going to change everything. He is not afraid though. This is what he was born for. He isn't a powerhouse like Koji or a terror like Ino. His shadow techniques are powerful, but they cannot stand against Lee or Tenten or most of the brawlers among his comrades. But his mind is a tool, is a weapon, and he's going to use it to pry open the corrupted ribs guarding the truth at the center of this mess, and then, once he figures it out, he's going to bring Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura home. Chapter 30, Come on down. Team 7 leaves for the last known location of the medic only 3 days after Sakura receives her mark as a SEAL master. The days predating their departure are filled with scrambled preparations, a long letter to Iruka-sensei detailing the new plans, and an absolutely scalding lecture from Kakashi regarding Sakura's recklessness with the Crucible seal. When they are finally ready to go, the other Jinchuriki see them off from the Oizu and promise to hold down the fort until they return. Unlike the last time the four of them traveled the length of Fire Country, Naruto finds that he has actually enjoyed their journey to the Land of Tea. They still have to be careful, of course, the four of them are wanted shinobi after all, but Sakura makes special look-away seals for all of them, and Kakashi uses the fucked up veiled scent jutsu again and they run. The freedom feels incredible. Naruto adores Uzushio, don't get him wrong. Something about the salt-laden breeze and the constantly shifting gray ocean, about the kaleidoscopic sunsets and the towering mountain reaching above the village makes his heart feel like it's overflowing. Sakura told him about Nami and her love for Uzushio in the days before they left. Naruto thinks that maybe loving Whirlpool is as intrinsic to Uzumaki blood as loving ramen is. Even still, to get away from the caves and onto the open road is a nice change of pace. It's easy to see how much he and Sakura and Sasuke have improved while staying in the archives, even if solely because of how fast they can travel now. It's only taken them 5 days to traverse the easternmost border of fire and reach the heart of Tea Country. The land here is less forest and more rolling hills interspersed with low-lying marshland. They've been mostly setting up camp in the croppings of short trees they come across, but a couple of nights they've stayed in some of the small towns along the way. The people there have been hospitable if completely disinterested in them. Tea Country is a land of drifters. It's situated perfectly to absorb refugees from growing unease and mist, traders using the western shipping channel to travel into wind and earth, or any number of unsavory characters fleeing through the Bay of Fire. All in all, Naruto and the others fit right in. Even among the transient masses, finding Tsunade Senju is proving much easier than Kakashi had been concerned about when he debriefed them all for this excursion. All Team 7 has had to do is ask in the local gambling den at each town they pass, and whatever sour-faced, overworked person ran it has been more than happy to provide everything they need to know about where the wayward Sannin is headed. One older, frowning woman had told Kakashi with a hiss that bitch drank me out of a year's worth of good sake, threw one of my regulars through a wall and then only settled on half of her debt with me. I don't care if you're a jealous ex or a bounty hunter, I hope she gets what's coming to her. Sakura, grinning in the mean way that she never did back when she was still pretending to be an empty-headed good girl, announces, I think I'm going to like Tsunade. I worry about the impact that Yujito has on you, Kakashi responds flatly as they leave the rundown inn. Their search has finally brought them to a town a half-day's run south of the bustling port d'Igarashi. The village of Tokoshi is small but spread out. Its layout is disjointed and without clear organization. A majority of the buildings are warehouses and craftsmen, but there is a fair showing of taverns as well. Tokoshi is a town that has grown out of the need for the rice farmers that populate the coast to not only sell their wares but also spend the coin they've made doing so. It's late morning as Team 7 makes their way up the main street, dodging carts and civilians hauling bushels of rice. They've already stopped in 3 of the smaller taverns in town, and the owners of each have pointed them unapologetically on the trail of Tsunade. She's definitely still here in town. Naruto is uncertain how he feels about meeting the slug Sannin. On one hand, he's more than ready to have the 8 trigrams problem solved. It's been pretty rough the past month. The dizzy spells and roaring hunger that had been a constant while they were still in Konoha are back with a vengeance. Sakura says it's to be expected, something about tertiary disintegration and chakra burn and all around bad shit. Mostly Naruto is just worried about Kurama though. He knows for a fact that the fox is silently taking the brunt of the seal's failings. The big idiot has been so much quieter and more withdrawn than normal, and if Naruto wasn't literally connected to his every emotion he'd think that the Nine Tails was mad at him. In reality though, Kurama is just exhausted. The other tailed beasts are starting to worry about him too, and that makes Kurama irritable cause he hates being worried about just as much as Naruto does, and the more pissed off he gets the more unsteady the seal is, and well, long story short, Naruto is really ready to get this figured out. However, he's still nervous about meeting Tsunade. Kurama had explained how the Sannin was related to Naruto. She may only be his great-aunt, but she's still the closest family Naruto has left alive as far as he's aware, and that's really cool but also vaguely terrifying cause what if she wants nothing to do with him? That would suck, a lot. Stop freaking out. Kurama's voice is tired and rough as it cuts through his anxieties. I'm not freaking out, Naruto lies impulsively and then flinches at the unimpressed look Kurama sends him. Naruto kicks at a stone as he follows a few paces back from the rest of his team. What if she hates us? Kurama considers the question silently for several long beats. Naruto isn't stupid. He knows his anxieties are unreasonable. Sakura or Sasuke or Kakashi would tell him that if he brought it up to them too, but knowing that still doesn't make the fear less jagged, less petrifying. Naruto has spent almost his entire life alone and despised, and until his team and the other Jinchuriki, that was as good as a law of the universe. There were exceptions of course. Shikamaru and Koji and Kiba were always cool, and Hinata was never cruel to him, and Iruka, well, Iruka is still his precious person, the one who saved him when darkness and hatred were about to swallow him whole. But everyone else despised him, and he tried to not let that bother him, tried to stay strong and happy cause their opinions have never meant shit compared to his team. But Tsunade is his family, is related to him by blood, and if she thinks he's a monster too, it won't make you worth any less or their hatred justified, Kurama gently answers the terrifying thought. But it would hurt so bad, Naruto tells him, quiet and uncertain like he almost never is. It would, the spirit agrees, but you would survive it. Naruto takes a deep, steadying breath. His fox is right. He's lived through so much pain and he'll live through more. And, most importantly, he doesn't have to do it alone anymore. Kakashi comes to a stop in front of a tall building with a kanji sign that identifies it as the second shift. Sasuke with Mika tucked snugly into the collar of his traveling cloak and Sakura stop next to their sensei. Naruto joins and all five of them stare up at the peeling, red-painted, gambling den. She's here. Sasuke asks after a moment. Kakashi turns slightly and raises an eyebrow at the Uchiha. You tell me, he says in a tone that dares them to show their skills. Sakura rises to the challenge instantly. She closes her eyes in concentration, folding her hands together to focus her chakra outward. Two strong chakra signatures in the building, she announces lowly after a few beats, unclear exactly where in the building they are, but one is definitely cage level. Most likely Tsunade and the apprentice we've heard about. Kakashi nods, good, so we can at least tentatively confirm they are here. Now, what do we do about that? Sasuke speaks this time. Mika's bright eyes are peering over his shoulder as he contemplates the tavern. Well, you warned us she may try and run when she sees us, so we don't want to spook her. The front door is too obvious and leaves room for her to escape out the back or through a window before we've pinned her down. Sharingan flickering to life, Sasuke steps back and runs his gaze across the entirety of the building, seeking the tiny details that will give them an edge. There, he points, that window is unlatched. We go in through the top floor and then sneak to the first floor landing so we can get an elevated view of the tavern layout and find the best approach strategy to keep her from running. Excellent plan, Kakashi tells him. Naruto has to hide a smile at the way Sasuke unconsciously stands straighter at the praise. His voice dropping from proud to serious, Kakashi asks them, all of you remember what I said about Tsunade and her apprentice? All three members of Team 7 and Mika nod. If it comes to a fight, don't get stuck by a senbon from Shizune if we wanna be able to move, Naruto responds sagely. And, his sensei prompts. And don't get hit at all by Tsunade if we wanna be able to have a body with bones that are in one piece. Gruesome but accurate. Kakashi agrees with morbid brightness. He cuts his gaze to Sakura next and orders, if shit hits the fan, do not try and test your seal's absorption against her strength. Sakura's response is quick and demure. Sure thing, sensei. Kakashi narrows his eyes even as Naruto has to fight down another grin and Sasuke huffs in exasperation. The only time Sakura is so agreeable is when she's not actually agreeing at all. Sakura, I mean it. So help me, I will ground you. The words are halfway light-hearted, but a note of seriousness still threads strongly through them. Sakura sighs. They all know that Kakashi is right. Her sentinel seal, painted on her skin with long wear ink before they left Uzushio, is still new, still untested in combat. As much as Naruto understands how his curious teammate is tempted to test her creation against the woman able to apparently punch through mountains, the margin for error is fatal in this instance. Fine, the young seal master grumbles, crossing her arms petulantly. Kakashi reaches and pats her shoulder. We'll practice with it when we get back to Uzushio so we can really work out the kinks before you have to use it against any real enemies. I'm sure Yujito would be happy to punch you plenty hard to test its capabilities. Sakura seems pleased by this and Naruto tries not to laugh. Crazy nerd. Warnings delivered. Kakashi gestures them towards the window above, flashing the bastardized hand signals he's taught them for go and quietly. Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto obey without pause. Sakura jumps from ground to wall and with delicate, perfectly balanced control darts up the side of the inn to the unlocked window. Sasuke follows her, though instead of sticking to the wall he bounds nimbly from a small ledge above the first story, to a drain pipe, to a handhold on the second floor to the correct window seal. Kakashi waits for Naruto to follow. Grinning, Naruto gathers a tiny fraction of Kurama's chakra in his feet and with a wash of power, he simply leaps from the ground, straight 3 stories up after his team. From the ground, his sharp ears catch Kakashi murmuring "Gods help me" before he's following after them. All 4 members of Team 7 land in the unlocked room on silent feet. The space is empty, clearly waiting for the next traveler who needs a place to rest their head. The decor is plain and the air smells of the hundreds of different people who have slept here over the years. It's a mix of road dust and sweat and sake and blood, and even Naruto blinks in confusion as one smell stands out strangely. Anesthetic? He and Kakashi, sharp noses alerting them to irregularity before the others notice, both stiffen and spin towards a sudden movement behind them. The click of the window latch being locked is as loud as a cannon blast in the small room. The dark-haired woman who had been crouched furtively above the window in wait pulls her hand back, muscles loose and ready to move at any moment. Before any of Team 7 can react, a voice from the door draws their attention. You've grown up, Haytake, but you're no less foolish than you were a kid. After all, you're still assuming that you're the most paranoid fucker out there. Tsunade Senju is somehow simultaneously much smaller and much larger than Naruto expected. The blonde Sannin is standing in the open doorway to the room, arms crossed sternly over her chest. She's short, barely taller than Naruto is, with hair several shades paler and a face that makes her look no older than 30. Her eyes are old, however, and her voice is layered with a lifetime's worth of pain. Kakashi steps forward and, smiling in the fabricated, bright way he does when he's out of his depth, he says, "Tsunade-heim. So good to see you again. I must admit I'm surprised you recognized me so quickly. Were you expecting us?" It's a question loaded many times over and the Sannin catches on immediately. "No, I didn't know you and your baby rogues were coming after me, Haytake. I just happened to be a good enough shinobi even after all these years to notice when 4 new chakra signatures appear in front of the inn I've been staying at, especially when one of them feels like a lightning storm trapped in a glass jar." She nods at Kakashi, and another like someone stacked the energy reserves of a couple of cage together and then set it on fire. Kurama humphs in annoyance from deep within Naruto's psyche. "I have much more than a couple of measly humans worth of chakra." Ignoring his fox's likely justified narcissism, Naruto glances to the side as his sensei for a hint as to what they should do. He is shocked to see that Kakashi looks like a scolded puppy. He's not the only one who notices. One of the Sannin's blonde eyebrows ticks up, accompanied by a slight smirk at the abashed look the notorious Kopinen isn't managing to hide. "Subtly was never your strong suit, even as a brat," she tells him, and then, posture not softening, Tsunade's keen eyes drift over Sasuke and Mika, Sakura, and lastly Naruto. Her eyes linger on him for several long beats. The dark-haired woman, Shizune, if Naruto remembers right, moves carefully around the edge of the room to stand by the Sannin. Finally, Tsunade speaks again. So Konoha's fallen angels, the infamous Team 7, have decided to seek out little ol' me. Her eyes go sharp, go deadly, and Naruto is reminded of Kakashi's warning from in front of the inn. What do you want? The slug Sannin demands. Kakashi flicks his eyes to Sakura, who sends him a barely perceptible nod in return. Determination lining her spine, their newly minted seal master steps forward and slowly enough to not register as a threat pulls a scroll out of one of the inner pockets of her traveling cloak. We need your healing capabilities, Lady Tsunade, she explains, crouching to unroll the parchment across the floor, showing a detailed diagram of the 8 trigrams. Tsunade doesn't move closer, but she does look over the page with interest. That's a complicated-looking piece of Fuinjutsu, kid. You're talking to the wrong Sannin. Jiraiya is the seal master, not me. He's not. Sakura bites out instantly. Tsunade blinks in surprise at the vehemence in Sakura's voice, and at the same moment Kakashi hisses, "Sakura, that's not relevant right now." Naruto thinks that it's very relevant considering how the old toad was, but Kakashi and Sakura are the ones with the game plan. He's just here to, well, be the problem that needs fixing, he supposes with a frown. Fine, Sakura grumbles, but Naruto can tell, and clearly so can Kakashi from the way he rubs a hand across the masked bridge of his nose, the conversation isn't over, just set aside for now. Looking back to the keenly watching medic, Sakura taps a finger on the scroll in front of her. We need to remove and then reconstruct the seal holding the 9 tails. It's a crazy statement, one that would send most people running, but the woman before them now isn't even close to most people. Why? The medic demands again, and this time she takes a single step into the room, curiosity bright in her gaze even though suspicion still reigns supreme. Sasuke is the one to answer the slug Sannin's question this time. Because Naruto's current seal is breaking down badly. At the rate it's degrading, he's heading for stage 4 chakra sickness in less than a year. Naruto watches as the curiosity in Tsunade's eyes grows, sharpens. You speak of that diagnosis with a lot of confidence, little Uchiha. Do you have a medic you are working with wherever you 4 miscreants are hidden out? Sasuke's eyebrows pull together in a glare, and he opens his mouth to most likely say something rude. Naruto interrupts him with a sharp elbow to his ribs, and at the same time Mika flicks her tail against his cheek reprovingly. Sasuke claps his mouth shut and takes a deep breath through his nose. Tsunade is watching this entire exchange with an expression stuck somewhere between amused and incredulous. I'm the medic. Sasuke growls finally, I've been watching and documenting the progression of Naruto's chakra sickness and coil burn since we noticed it months ago. You're the medic. The Sannin sounds shocked. You can't be older than 14, and I don't know of any shinobi specialized in medical ninjutsu who are that young. More importantly, I've never known a single Uchiha who was interested in healing. The switch from Sasuke's standard prickly unfriendliness to genuine anger is subtle enough that most wouldn't notice it. Team 7 does instantly. Naruto steps closer against Sasuke's side and Mika lets out a quick, calming purr even as Sakura sends a glare towards Tsunade, and Kakashi's hands tighten momentarily in his pockets. Yeah, well, since I found out that I'm one of the 2 remaining Uchiha that Konoha didn't fucking murder, I'm feeling a little less beholden to tradition than my clansmen may have been. Tsunade freezes, the mocking mirth dying on her face. She reaches behind her back without looking and closes the door with enough force that a few cracks spider out along the door frame. Gaze not leaving Sasuke, she says, I may have left the leaf years ago, but I know about the Uchiha massacre, boy. Itachi Uchiha turned traitor and killed his own, not the village. Konoha is cursed, but it isn't evil. Sasuke's rage rises. Naruto can feel his chakra beginning to crackle in violent fury where he's pressed against the other boy's side. Mika's tails swish in agitation and her claws slide from her gray paws to dig silently into her summoner's shoulder, preparing for either sudden movement or combat. You don't know anything, Sasuke's voice makes Uzushio's winter winds warm in comparison. Sensing the rising tension, Shizune, silent till now, steps forward to grab Tsunade's arm and murmurs anxiously. We should go home. No. Tsunade's exclamation is absolute in the small space. I am no empty-headed Konoha loyalist. There is clearly a story and secrets here. If you want my help, then I want your information, and, she turns scalpel sharp eyes to Naruto, judging by that boy's chakra flow and his pallor, you don't just want my help, you need it. Team 7 exchanges looks. They hadn't planned on bringing the Sannin into the loop like that. Some amount of trust was going to be needed to repair the seal, but that wasn't supposed to extend to what drove them to flee the village in the first place. Attempting to smooth things over, Kakashi offers a nice smile and tries, it's really not much of a tale, Tsunade. We are more than willing to offer coin for your specialties though, or dash. Her laughter strangles his words. Hey, take, you are 20 years too young to try and play me like that. She glares over all of them. You tell me everything or I walk out of this room now. Maybe I'll even grab the first Konoha shinobi I see and tell them everything you've said. She has them backed into a corner and knows it. Naruto finds his voice at last and quietly, carefully, he says, you may not like what we have to say, it's not a happy story. When Tsunade looks at him again, there is something so tired to her eyes, so lonely, that Naruto feels for a moment that maybe it's not so strange that they are related after all. Do I seem like someone who's used to happy fucking stories? Tsunade asks, and the words are harsh, but the voice that offers them is more exhaustion than anger. Naruto looks at her false youth, at her travel-worn sandals and her mournful eyes. The scent of sake clings to her like bad perfume. Naruto may only be 13, but he knows enough about the world to understand that when adults drink a little, it's usually cause they want to have a night to remember, but when adults drink a lot, it's because they don't want to remember anything at all. Kakashi glances at each of Team 7 in turn, waiting for their nods of approval. Naruto has to elbow Sasuke before the other boy gives a grunt of assent, but in the end, the decision is unanimous. They need her. And so they tell her everything. By the time that they are done, the sun is starting its descent toward the horizon. The golden light is catching on the slight shimmer of the silencing ward that Sakura put up so many hours ago. Tsunade is sitting on one of the low beds in the room, fingers steepled in front of her mouth and face impossible to read. Shizune, in comparison, has been pacing for the last hour or so. She's quiet like her master, but her nerves are still clear from the way she keeps adjusting and rearranging the senbon tucked into her sleeves. And so we're here. To ask for help. Sakura finishes, looking back at Kakashi, who's leaning against the wall as if she's checking to see if she's missed anything. Their sensei has let Sakura, Sasuke, and him do most of the talking. Naruto isn't sure if it's cause he thinks they'll do a better job or if it's some kind of shinobi practice, or he's scared of the old hag, Kit, Kurama says, exhausted, but still unable to fully suppress the amusement in his voice. Naruto studies Tsunade. She doesn't look particularly terrifying, but then again, neither does Yujito, and Naruto has seen her put Kakashi flat on his back more than once. After a tense, weighty silence, Tsunade's distant eyes sharpen and refocus on Naruto. You say you grew up isolated under Saratobi's orders. Naruto nods, a little uncertain, before clarifying. I was in the orphanage until I was 9, and then Konoha gave me an apartment after the orphanage staff said they couldn't keep me anymore. I had money for food and stuff, but it was never really enough and I had to get real good at budgeting. I used to say it wasn't all that bad, but... He trails off and shrugs uselessly. Tsunade stares at him, face unreadable. For a few moments Naruto is terrified she'll tell him to suck it up or something. I'm sorry, she says with a halting, strained gravity to her words. Naruto freezes, stares back. He can count on one hand the number of people who have apologized to him in his entire life for his upbringing, or rather, lack of one. The slug Sannin clenches her eyes and drops her hands into tight, white-knuckled fists, and Naruto really doesn't know what to do. I had heard that Kushina had a kid. The medic confesses the few times Jiraiya chased me down in the months before the Nine Tails took a chunk out of Konoha, he mentioned that airheaded brat Kushina married had made him the godfather for some goddamned reason. When I heard that Namikaze and her had died, I should have checked on you, but I thought that Jiraiya would do his duty and I couldn't go back to the leaf because the curse was just proven at that point. And she lets out a breath so long and heavy that for a moment, no matter how young her face is, Tsunade seems like she's ancient. And I'm making excuses. I'm sure you've heard plenty of those from plenty of adults over your life. Naruto stares. Blinks. Tries to figure out what he's supposed to say back. Unaware of his confusion, Tsunade keeps talking. I should have been there, kid. You're my family and I decided to just ignore that because it was easier than helping, easier than overcoming my fear. Maybe he realizes that Naruto can't figure out how to respond for the life of him, or maybe he just doesn't feel like holding his tongue after the comments about his clan, but Sasuke is the one who responds to Tsunade's confession. You should have been there. He agrees shortly, gaze locked on the Sannin even as she raises an eyebrow in incredulity and Naruto turns to stare at him. He's done it before, but something about Sasuke defending him, speaking up for him, makes Naruto's stomach twist and his cheeks flame and his heart try and gallop away in his chest and Tsunade's discerning eyes cut towards him briefly and her eyebrow climbs even higher at whatever look is on his face. Sasuke isn't done yet. You weren't there, but you can make it up to him by being there now. You said it yourself, we need you. He needs you. The slug Sannin leans back on the bed, her strong shoulders flexing under the teal kimono she wears. They all wait with bated breath. If Tsunade decides to walk out of here, to leave Naruto to his misfortune again, he has no idea what they'll do. It's not like they can stop her, and more than that, it would suck to be tossed aside like some annoyance that's easier left behind. Again. You may be a brat Uchiha, but... Tsunade smiles wryly, you are right. Directing the question to Shizune, more gentle than she's been in this entire encounter, she asks, are you okay with a change of scenery? Her apprentice, hands still close to the weapons on her wrists, rolls her eyes at the question. You ask that as if it's as simple as moving to a new town and not siding with a rogue shinobi group being apparently hunted but nearly every major shinobi village. Naruto, always watching, always reading those around him, is shocked at the lightning-fast way that Tsunade's face crumbles, how suddenly terrified and heartbroken she looks before managing to rest her face back into something semi-apathetic. If you're worried about it, I've always said you don't have to stay with me, the Sannin offers calmly. The look that the young woman sends in response to Tsunade is deeply unimpressed. And I've always told you that for being a medical genius you're an absolute idiot for thinking I'm ever going to leave just because things get a little complicated. Respectfully, Tsunade Heim. Relief flashes across Tsunade's face as bright as the sun and she laughs, grating and warm, before looking back towards Team 7. Well, looks like you've got yourself not one, but two phenomenal medics in your corner then. Give us time to wrap up affairs here and we'll meet you all at the Traveler's Shrine 10 miles north of here. We can travel with you the rest of the way to Whirlpool. Naruto feels like this was all too easy. He also feels maybe like he's going to cry. Tears pricking at the corner of his eyes hotly, he dips into a deep bow. Thanks Tsunade Heim, Like he almost never is, he's at a loss for words. A small, earth-shatteringly strong hand drops onto the back of his blonde head and gives his hair a fond ruffle. Naruto stands back up to find Tsunade smiling kindly at him. That's what family is for, kid, and lose the formalities. I'm your aunt, not your princess. Great Aunt Sasuke corrects, arms crossed over his chest as he watches the Sannin. Naruto can hear the smugness in his voice, can see the flash of troublemaker in his eyes. Apparently Tsunade can too, because she points at Sasuke threateningly and says, watch it, you fucking brat. I could wipe the ground with you with my eyes closed. Sasuke shrugs, maybe. Still his great aunt though, since you're old and all that. Kakashi, sensing that Sasuke is about to be thrown bodily out the window, steps forward and gives a curving eye smile and a shallow bow. Thank you, Tsunade. We'll leave now so that you and Shizune can make your preparations. And so that you don't try and kill Sasuke, Sakura adds sweetly from Kakashi's side. Smart of you all, Tsunade grumbles. She glares once more scathingly at Sasuke and then spins and storms out of the room. They can hear her begin shouting an unfamiliar name as she reaches the top of the stairs. Shizune grimaces. That's the head bartender. She's probably going to try and talk him down on whatever our tab is. Kakashi nods sympathetically. Kushina used to say that what the slug Sannin lacked in delicacy she made up for in force. Sounds like that holds true for her bartering as well. Downstairs an unfamiliar voice begins shouting back at the Sannin and then something shatters loudly. Shizune flinches, bows quickly, and then says, we'll catch up with you all. If you'll pardon me. She darts out of the room to go intervene and keep her mentor from either killing someone or having another bounty placed on her head by a livid tavern owner. Team 7 stands in silence for several long beats as the sound of the bar fight downstairs escalates rapidly. Finally, Kakashi announces, "That went well? I think that went well." Reaching up to scratch Mika's chin, Sasuke glares at Sakura. "She wasn't going to kill me." The pinkette shrugs in response, resecuring the 8 trigrams scroll to her belt. She was sure thinking hard about it. "We really are going to have to work on your habit of antagonizing people who could kick our ass," Mika tells her summoner with forlorn consideration. Even as his team bickers, Naruto finds himself staring at the place where Tsunade had been sitting. He feels a little in shock still. He didn't realize until the moment she actually said that she'd help, but the youngest Jinchuriki had been fully prepared for his great aunt to tell them that she wanted nothing to do with him. Instead, she was going to help, was going to travel across the elemental nations and put herself and her student, someone she clearly cherished, at risk, all for him. It's good. It's so good. It's amazing. He's no longer just the last Uzumaki, no longer just an orphan. He has an aunt. And he knows that he's had family for a while now. Between Iruka and Kakashi, Kurama, Sakura, Sasuke, and the other Jinchuriki, he is so loved. But despite that certainty, there has always been some dark, miserable part of him, the part that celebrated every birthday and holiday alone, the part that had to take care of himself when he got the flu, the part who was so lonely it nearly killed him, which whispered cruelly that maybe his new family is only around 'cause they have to be. It's not like Kakashi and Sakura and Sasuke chose to be on a team with him, it whispers. And the other Jinchuriki care about him, 'cause of Kurama, not 'cause of Naruto, it says. Even Kurama was sealed into him against his will and Iruka is the exception. Always the first and the best and the most precious. Iruka had other options, far easier ones at that, and he still chose him even when it meant blood and pain and nearly dying to keep Naruto safe. And now Tsunade has done the same. Naruto finds himself smiling, a feeling of solar flare, leaping, scorching joy coming to life in his chest. He has a family. He has a family and they chose him. Loud, annoying, coarse, lonely, him. Tsunade is going to help fix the seal and that is a gift in itself, but this more than anything feels like the most precious thing that anyone has ever done for him. The 4 of them leave the inn in high spirits. Kakashi still feels a little shell-shocked that no one got punched. Tsunade is as terrifying as ever. Kakashi doesn't have the clearest memories of her considering that he was only 7 when she left the village, but damn if she doesn't make him feel exactly that young even now. But she's going to help them and Kakashi's staggering gratitude for that fact far overwhelms his annoyance at being made to feel like a child. They make their way down the street and towards the edge of town. Sakura is grinning unabashedly and Naruto is bouncing with every step and talking a mile a minute about how cool Tsunade is. Even Sasuke seems unable to suppress the smile that keeps slipping onto his face. Kakashi is just happy they are happy and more than that, he's so ready to have the 8 trigrams problem handled. Things are looking up. And Kakashi is not looking at their surroundings closely enough, which he unfortunately doesn't realize until Naruto runs face first into a broad chest clad in a Konoha standard Jonin flak jacket. Damningly familiar, broad, tan hands catch the Jinchuriki's shoulders and a deep voice says, "Whoa there kid. Watch where you are going," and all Kakashi can see is the glint of the sunset off 3 headbands bearing the Leaf's insignia. Sakura and Sasuke realize only milliseconds after him that something is wrong, but it takes Naruto until he is looking up into the other shinobi's face with an apologetic grin and the starts of a bright sorry on his tongue to recognize the face now staring down at him in open shock. Asuma Saratobi is looking at the Jinchuriki standing directly in front of him like he's seen a ghost. The 2 shinobi on either side of him are equally frozen. Genma Shiranui doesn't even blink as the stick of dango that he'd been working through falls out of his slack mouth, and meanwhile Reito Kyuzunoa is blinking over and over again as if Kakashi and the kids are a mirage of some kind. Kakashi feels like the sun has fallen out of the sky. The time Team 7 had to prepare and hide and train has officially just run out. Konoha has come calling. Check the description for the links to the author.